You're listening to the Joel Martin Mastery Podcast, home of the 2-hour deep dive interview with gold, platinum, and multi-platinum bands, including Stained, Blue Rodeo, The Arkells, Finger 11, Big Wreck, Moist, Bedouin Soundclash, I Mother Earth, Ill Scarlet, Neverending White Lights, Thornley, and many more. Please take a moment to subscribe to the podcast, as well as share, comment, and like. Now let's dive in to today's episode. Welcome, everyone, to today's episode of the podcast. Thank you for joining us. We really appreciate it. We are joined by a very special guest. He's achieved a level of mastery as the drummer for the Juno-nominated band Joydrop, as well as the platinum-selling band Bedouin Soundclash. He's also released 2 solo albums as a singer-songwriter under the name Lalo. So welcome to the podcast, Tony Rabalao. Tony, how are you? And how good did it feel in the last month, going out on tour across Canada with Bedouin Soundclash? Must be nice after a lengthy pandemic lockdown to be on the road.
Yeah, first of all, hey, Joel, thanks for having me, man. Really love what you're doing and great to be a part of it. Thanks for asking me to join this. You know what? I remember, it's funny because the last thing I did musically before the shutdown was we had just finished wrapping up a Canadian tour with Bedouin, and we had just a couple of one-off dates left over, and we were driving to Kingston, and it was like, I think it was like the Thursday. Everything kind of shut down on the Sunday, as I recall. And the Thursday, we're driving up to Kingston. We had 3 shows left, one in Kingston, one in Peterborough, one in Buffalo. And as we're driving there, we're hearing all the news, like, yeah, you know, this is closing down. This is getting canceled. There's concerns about this, and this is shutting down. And I think it was like, there was supposed to be like an NBA game or something. And they're like, no, we got to cancel this game. And I'm like, okay, this is really serious. And we're like, do we really, you know, us going up to Kingston to play in front of, I don't know, 750 to 1,000 people all crammed in this room while this is really happening for real? Is this a good idea? And we're like, no. And the managers are calling, and agents are calling, and promoters in the venue, and all these calls are flying by. We get to Kingston, we check into our hotel, and then we get to the venue, and then we're like, nah, we shouldn't be doing this. Like, this isn't the right thing to do right now. We should just call it and play it safe. Drove back home. And then, you know, I was thinking, yeah, you know, a couple of weeks of everything kind of stopping just to let this thing blow over, we'll be fine. You know, and as we all know, a couple of years later. And so, yeah, it's great to be back playing in front of people, people coming together, enjoying live music, traveling. It's awesome, you know? So, yeah, it's a good thing.
Yeah, so you have the perspective where you were touring right up until things shut down, and now you're touring again where hopefully it seems like we're near the end of this.
Yeah.
Have you found a big difference between the two? Like, are we back to what the crowds were back before the pandemic? Is it still maybe the crowds are down a bit where people are still a little scared of going out? Or do you think the crowds seem to be actually better or bigger because everyone that was cooped up really wants to get out there and be social again?
I think right now, it feels like I don't really feel the difference. It feels like it always did, you know? There was a while when things kind of opened up, and you know, I guess people had some reticence. They were a little bit like, is it too soon? The crowds were still there because there was a certain element of people that were just like, you know what, we've been chomping at the bit for this, and we're going to do it, and we don't care, and we're sick of this, and we just, you know. But now it just feels like old times, you know. And actually, it's funny because last summer we started doing a bunch of festival dates. And because a lot of promoters and people were like, oh, okay, there's going to be this huge pent up demand for live music again, then everybody was throwing festivals, and there was tons of festivals that had never been there before, and it got a little oversaturated. So, you know, some of the bigger festivals, more established ones, took a bit of a hit because you know, some new upstart down the road was doing a festival, and people can't do everything all the time and have to pick their moments. So now some of those new guys, you know, realize it's not just as easy as just wanting to throw a festival. It's a lot of risk, a lot of costs, a lot of stuff involved. And the old guys are kind of like, yeah, we know how to do this. And things are sort of settling back to where they
were. You see kind of the scary side of festivals. Recently on Netflix, there's the Woodstock fiasco and the Fire Festival fiasco, both
Yeah,
documentaries. And you
yeah,
realize it's not as easy as booking a venue and booking bands, like
yeah,
security and food and washrooms and
yeah,
amenities. Yeah.
yeah. And you know, I watched that the Woodstock doc, and I remember at the time when it was happening, Joydrop was just kind of one of the peak periods of our sort of album and touring
Because that was
cycle.
about 99, right? So you're in
Yeah,
between your two albums, I guess.
yeah. So we were kind of like talking to our agent, going, "Get us on this. This could be cool." And in retrospect, looking at this thing, it's like, oh, I'm glad we didn't do that, because it was just a shit show, man. And it was just, you know, a lot of greed. And that was the first concern. The original Woodstock wasn't a money making thing. It was just that's something that they wanted to do in a very volatile time, late 60s,
Yeah.
after they'd all been through all that stuff, the war and civil rights movements, all this stuff had been going on.
It was all love and peace then,
Yeah,
and
assassinations, and yeah, so that was the impetus behind it at the time. And then 40 years later, they were like, now we want to make some money, so they're going to charge, you know, $10 for a bottle of water, and you can't bring your own water in, and you know, all this stuff that caused it to just, you know, disintegrate into what it became. So
yeah, that's a great example that you can't always replicate something great that's
yeah,
happened in the past, right? No
yeah,
matter how
especially
much you try.
and especially if you're coming from a different place. If they came from a place of, you know, just sharing and community and love. And yeah, though, you know, maybe let's break even. If you make some money, great. I mean, nobody, you know, this is a capitalist society. People want to make money, but you can make money and not gouge people. You know, people understand that you want to make money and maybe not lose money. But when you're charging $10 for a bottle of water, and that's even like scarce, that means you don't give a shit about them. You just, you know, you just want to make money, right?
Yeah,
Then
and even the $10 or $12 they were charging, that is 1999. Like that
that's, yeah,
in this day, that's even
yeah,
that's 15, 16. I don't know. I don't know
totally,
what
yeah,
that costs today, but that's
yeah,
ridiculous. I
yeah,
I wanted to, I was excited for this interview because I actually know you personally. We have a history going back to Toronto a while
yeah,
ago. So
yeah.
I wanted to kick off this episode powerfully. So
Okay,
I felt like I had to reach out to somebody to help me out here. So
okay.
I reached out to another amazing Canadian drummer, and I have
Mhm.
some kind words for you. So this is from Mike Sleeth, who's the drummer for
Oh, yeah, yeah,
the three-time Grammy nominee Shawn Mendes, who's like one of the biggest artists in the world.
yeah.
And Mike's has the following words to say. He says, Tony is an absolute legend, the nicest guy, and a monster on the drums. So that's from Mike Sleeth to help
Thanks,
set
Mike.
the tone right here.
Well, listen, I got mad respect for Mike. He's a badass, and he's a great guy too. So I love watching his Instagram and seeing his travels and all that stuff. So he's doing great, and I wish him safe travels and lots more rocking, man. He's awesome. Thanks, Mike, if you're watching.
We'll get this to him for sure. So I always like to start by sharing how the guests and I know each other. In the music industry, it's all about networking and relationships and building community. So I like to show that.
Yep.
And in our case, I moved to Toronto in 2010.
Yep.
For different opportunities in the music industry. And very quickly after I moved there, I started looking for open mics to perform at.
Mhm.
And everyone was talking about this legendary free fall open mics on Sundays.
Yep.
This was in the Kensington Market. I believe it was at Supermarket was the venue at the time.
Yep.
And I went out, I would drive from Mississauga to Kensington Market. I went out probably 4 or 5 times.
Yep.
And that's where I met you. You were hosting that. I believe it was with Steve York, if I'm
Yep.
remembering correctly.
Yep.
And it was amazing, just a community and a great venue. And it sounded great. And you could feel the love and support from not just you guys, the organizers, but from the crowd as well. Like everyone wanted to be there and everyone
Yep.
wanted to
Totally.
support.
Yep.
And man, I remember even there was a time where I went where Justin Nozuka was there and he got up and played. So it was such like a hub for the Toronto industry. So those are my memories of where we got started. And it was only later, like years later, I found out you were the drummer for Joydrop, who I was a big fan of when Sometimes Wanna Die came out. So
yep. Yeah, it's cool. And actually we still have the Sunday nights going. Actually, we're on tonight. If anybody wants to come out, we're at the Dakota now. We moved it there at the end of January. We were at the Supermarket for about 15 years. We had a great run there, but I think we just decided, me and Steve, that it was just time for a change. Dakota was a great fit. It's a great venue. It's got its own lineage. It's a great music spot. You walk in there, they got that soft lighting in the wood and cow skulls and whatever, and it just feels like a really good mecca for live music, and it is, really inviting, more intimate, and we're having a great time there. So we're there every Sunday. Come on out. It's still that same vibe. We still got lots of music, not just musicians, but producers and other artists that come in, and not just there to play, but also just to meet each other and to network and to hang and exchange. So it's a great place for that if you want to, meet people and hear what other people are up to, and it's a good hang. One of the things that me and Steve wanted to separate ourselves from other open mics, because there are a lot of other open mics, but we wanted it to feel more like a party, more like a gathering, as opposed to like, I'm just there to play my songs, drink some tea, and then leave when I'm done. Because a lot of open mics are like that. We want it to be a hang. We want it to be a hub, like you said. And we've seen bands start from there. We've seen babies born that couples met there. We've seen, people get married. I've seen, a young kid, 17 years old, started coming every week with his dad. And now he's a Grammy nominee. He's on tour with John Mayer. His name JP Sachs. He's awesome. He's doing great.
Amazing. He had one of the biggest songs during the pandemic, right?
Totally. Yep.
Yeah.
So, when I see stuff like that, it kind of just makes me go, you know what? This is why we did this, so, and we're still doing it. And those opportunities are still there for everybody who chooses to come on in.
So after 15 years, that's a lengthy period where you have a lot of data points where you can tell us all the things that have happened. I mean, 15 years is a long time for brand new artists to get started and grow into world-class musicians. So you've seen it all there. Yeah,
and I love watching people, their evolution slowly, because it's not a light switch. It's not like you do something once and it's on. You gotta stay at it. So I've seen people come when they first came and they just started. They didn't even know how to tune a guitar. They didn't even know that they had to tune a guitar or that they were out of tune. And then eventually they kept at it. They keep coming. They come that week. They reassess when they go home the next day and go, what could I have done better? Oh, maybe I could sing this song. Maybe I need to learn a bit of mic control. Maybe I need to learn how to tune my guitar. This song seems to resonate. Maybe I should write another one like that, or you know what I mean? And then they come back the next weekend and they build on that. And then I've seen them then go off where they don't even have to come because they need the workshop aspect of it. They come because they want to. And now they're off doing their own shows, doing their own albums. And I love to see that evolution, because that's, if you want, it's like what you want to get out of it, you can, is what you put into it. It's not just because you show up doesn't mean it's going to be handed to you like you're going to get gigs and all this magic's going to happen. You still got to work at it. And you still got to put the time in and the effort and seize the opportunities that are just laying there waiting for you to grab them, right? So
and with such a supportive crowd there, it's the perfect place to try out new material, try out new songs. Those new artists eventually build up a repertoire where they can do a full set, and they've developed enough talent that people want to pay to see them, and they can go from there on to paid gigs. It's like the different steps, right?
Yeah, that's right. And then you too can be opening up for John Mayer or up for a Grammy or whatever it is. Sky's the limit, right?
That's amazing. And I guess the last thing about the open mic, if I remember correctly, you guys would have special guests every few weeks as well. So there's a chance to hear some amazing local artists. I don't know if you still do that or.
Yeah, we still do it. We call that our feature. Actually, we do it the last Sunday of every month. And tonight is actually, because it's the last Sunday of the month, it's we have an artist named Childlike, and she's awesome. She's got great songs, great energy. And she's going to be doing the feature. She starts at 7. It's free. Come down there, you get to see somebody, because usually with the open mic, we give everybody 2 songs. And, it's an opportunity for an artist to stretch out, hear some more of their stuff, also get, promote whatever they're doing. And, play in front of, bring some of their crowd and our crowd, and, just a good little chance for some exposure there.
So So we met back in 2010. We stayed in touch, mostly online since then. Since I started the podcast just under 3 years ago, it's funny as I'm going on 100 interviews now, and these are all
Wow.
incredible musicians, mostly
Yeah.
from Canada, some are international as well. But
Yep.
as I'm studying and doing my research on these artists, you start to see kind of a thread through all of them, and
Yeah.
your name keeps coming up as whether you played on this album or played live with that artist, or you have a history with them. So you also were kind enough to provide some kind words. So just like I shared some kind words from Mike a
Yeah.
minute ago,
Yeah.
you provided kind words for Casey Roberts with the
Yeah.
Live
Oh, yeah.
Revolution,
Yep.
with Rich Bedeau from Finger 11 Saint
Yeah.
Asonia,
Yeah.
and Gordy Johnson from Big Sugar, the legend himself. So,
Yep.
so I wanted to start by saying thank you for providing those quotes. I know that those three really appreciated it, right? They felt the love
Yep.
from someone that they respected. So, thank you for doing that.
Oh, it's a pleasure, man. You tour, you do your thing, and in your travels, it's a small, it's a small world. The music world is even smaller. So, things come full circle. You meet people. Sometimes you haven't seen them for years, and you end up on a festival somewhere, and you're like, wow, I haven't seen you since. And then you're trying to knock your heads together and figure out where the last time you saw each other was. But it's great. It's a great community of artists that we all have a passion for it, and we're all in it for life. It's not a hobby. It's not something we're doing for fun. This is what we do. So when you're amongst other spirits like that, you're going to cross paths, and the web just gets wider, and more connected, and it's awesome when things come full circle. So, and you never know how sometimes, right?
Yeah, you guys are definitely all lifers. All the people
Yeah.
I interview, it's like that you guys will be doing this till your last breath for sure. You could
uh,
feel that that's just the spirit that
yeah.
that's who
Yep.
you guys are.
Yep.
So we're this is a full 2 hour deep dive. We're gonna go through your entire life, career, discography. We're gonna talk Joydrop, Laylo, Bedouin
Awesome.
Soundclash,
Yeah.
other things. I want to take it all the way back to the beginning
Okay.
because none of us are born with this crazy talent. It is, there's a little luck, there's a ton of hard work, there's vision, there's goal setting, there's
Yep.
triumphs, there's challenges that you overcome. So
Yeah.
I like to show our guests that they're looking at more of a final product with you where you've spent a
Right.
lifetime working towards mastery.
Yeah.
I want the young musicians that are listening that don't know how to tune a guitar to
Right.
see your humble beginnings. So
Right.
let's take it back to the beginning. Where does this love of music come from? And is there maybe an earliest musical memory that stands out to you?
Well, I grew up in a household that was musical. Like there was a lot of innate musical abilities, but they weren't. I wasn't my brothers and sisters and my parents. They're not musicians. My brother could have been a badass drummer if he wanted to be. He was good at everything, but there was always a love of music. So there was a lot of music in the house and different styles of music. So my mom she was into. I was born in South Africa, so there was some of the South African music that she loved and my dad loved, and she also loved a lot of classical music. So there was a lot of that. My dad was into like South African music, like Hugh Masekela, Miriam Makeba, but he was also into a lot of jazz, Miles Davis, the Beatles, Santana. These were the things that I heard growing up. My older brother, he was a rocker. My sister, she was more of the R&B funkster, and I was kind of I'm the youngest, so I kind of got in the middle of all of that stuff, and I heard it all, and so it all gets infused. And when I was younger, I remember not really liking when my mother would play the classical music, but then you get older, and I now have a great appreciation for it. It all gets in there, and then when it's your time to express yourself, all that stuff that you ingested as a youngster, it all starts to come up as your experience. So I had a natural affinity towards the drums. I remember the first time sitting behind a drum kit, I knew I'd be able to play it. Like I knew I wouldn't have to struggle with the coordination thing. I don't know if you can see what I'm
Like the
doing here.
rest of us, yeah.
Yeah, I just had it. I could do it. I wasn't great, but I could that basic coordination thing, I had it. And my mom wanted to put me into piano, which is it's a good idea, but I could see it was more like yeah, you don't want a 8-year-old kid bashing on drums in the house. You'd rather just have them start on the piano. It's a little bit easier to take.
Hmm.
And I did that, but I didn't really enjoy it. And I was always bugging them to get me a drum kit, and then finally they did. So yeah.
Did you start kind of on pots and pans or practice pads, or quickly you got a
My,
drum kit?
no, no, not quickly. My brother actually made me. He whittled me a pair of drumsticks, and I would air drum. But even when I was air drumming, I knew that I was doing what they were doing. I knew I was doing it right. It wasn't just flailing around. I knew that I was doing the right thing. So I air drummed. That was my practice, because I practiced it as though I was on a kit. Your mind doesn't know the difference. If I'm doing this, right, my mind doesn't care if there's a drum, an actual drum at the end of my hands. It knows that what this motion means. So if you can practice without a drum kit. And when I was a kid, I didn't realize that, but that's what I was actually doing. That was practice, even though, I didn't get a drum kit till I was maybe 12 or 13. So
What just when you said that, what it triggered for me, where you're saying, you're visualizing yourself playing drums and the mind doesn't know the difference.
yeah,
It's the same thing where, I've gone through a lot of stuff with personal growth and inspirational speakers, and they say the same thing, where they always tell you to visualize
yeah,
kind of that perfect future and achieving those goals, because the brain doesn't know the difference
yeah,
between reality and memory and dreaming and fantasizing. It just sees you doing it, and it's
yeah,
like, that's the way it is, and you kind of
yeah.
manifest that.
That's right. That's right. And I remember there was a time when I had sold I had sold my drum kit, and I had ordered another one. And I thought, I timed it so that, yeah, by the time I sell it, my new one would be here, and I could just, keep going. And there was some delays and delays on delays, and my new kit didn't come. So I went about a month. And this is in my formative years when I was practicing, 4 or 5 hours a day, as much as I could. So it was driving me crazy that I couldn't practice. But then I remembered what I was just telling you about, like when I was a kid. And I was like, yeah, that will work. So I would sit in a chair, close my eyes, and I'd go through all the motions as though my drum kit was there. And when my kit finally came, I could feel that all that visualization, the practice without the drum kit, paid off, because my facility was better, my ideas were better. It was flowing as though I had never stopped. Right.
You
So
you just made me remember, back in grade 10 in high school, I was in music class, and the only instrument closest, I'm a guitarist, the only instrument closest was you could play bass. And I remember, say, the 30-minute bus ride home, I didn't have a bass, but I had the notebook.
yeah,
And for the 30 minutes, I would look at the music,
yeah,
and I would air bass, and I could legit like see what I was playing, and I would
yeah,
get home, and it was 100% like I had 30 minutes of practice on the bass. I'd get
totally, yeah,
home and I could play what I was practicing without the bass. So
yeah,
I know what you're saying here.
yeah.
I'm feeling you.
And it goes, and that goes with anything. If you're a basketball player, if you're a same thing, you sit there and you want to practice your foul shot, it's the same thing. Go through all that, and a lot of the, elite athletes, they'll tell you the same thing. That you don't necessarily have to be in a court, on a golf course, on a stage, or in a rehearsal room with your stuff. You can still do it right here. So yeah.
Who would you say were your biggest drumming influences at that young age growing up? So let's say when you first got the drum kit until you're, I don't know, 14 or 16 or something.
Man, when I was a kid, and I still am to this day, huge Rush fan.
Amazing.
Yeah, Neil Peart was like, wow, to me at the time. John Bonham's a big one. Stuart Copeland is another one. Yeah, I mean, I'll tell you a funny story. I consumed, like, I think Permanent Waves was my favorite Rush album. Actually, there was just a show. Good friend of mine, Dave Langeth, badass drummer, who's on that. It's a tribute to Rush, and I know that album inside out. And I remember being a kid, and I thought, Neil Peart's the best drummer in the world. And it dawned on me, this is like 13-year-old me going, wait a minute. If Neil Peart's the best drummer in the world, and I know all those licks, I'm the second best drummer in the world. That's how I used to think when I was a kid. But yeah. So those were my like my early sort of, influences that evolved over time. There's a lot of guys that I influenced me that are like some jazz drummers and some more fusion guys, and there's a lot of different styles. Ringo Starr is a great drummer. Phil Collins is another great drummer. Dave Grohl, amazing drummer. Um, and then there's a lot of guys that some people wouldn't even recognize. The average person wouldn't know their names, but they're amazing.
They're probably super in demand session drummers, right? That don't have the
Yeah,
name recognition.
and live guys, and Larnell Lewis is an amazing drummer, one of my favorites.
He
Uh,
actually came up in a recent interview. So I had audio engineer Jill Zimmerman, who's in the
mhm.
Toronto area. She worked on 7 albums in 2022.
Yep.
7 albums, and 4 of them got nominated for Junos. Like
Yeah.
she's on a roll.
Yeah.
And she, after interviews, I always ask my guests, is there anyone you recommend that you think would be a great guest for future episodes? And she
Right.
said Larnell Lewis. She said he's the best drummer I've ever worked with.
Yeah. No,
So
yeah.
he just
He's
came
a
up, and I had to research him
yeah.
to.
He's a monster. He's like a world class drummer. Like he's up there with the best of them,
That's
and a great
amazing.
guy too.
The 3 drummers you mentioned as being big influences, when
Yep.
you look at a list of the top 10 greatest drummers of all time, those 3 are always in that top 10. Like
Always.
you pick the best to
Yeah.
study from.
Yeah. And there's a reason for it. And it's not only just when I say I mean they're my influences. Now those lists. Yeah, the best. What does that even mean? Right? We know it's like they're the most popular, they're most influential. There's a lot of different aspects, but for me, one of the things that I look for is just individuality. Like they have their own voice. Obviously, there's a certain level of technical proficiency, that you have to be even considered, and they all have that. Um, but when it comes down to it, it's their voice and their individuality and how they choose to express themselves on the instrument that we all have in common. But you can put two different people on the same kit, and you'll think it's a completely different drum kit, right?
Yeah, all 3
Um,
of those drummers, the moment any of those 3 play, it's them.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, such a unique style. So you started with drums,
Yeah.
but over the years, you also play guitar, you also sing, you're a
Yeah.
songwriter. So
Yeah.
at what point do each of those come into play?
Well, I'm a functional guitar player. I write songs on guitar, and the same thing with piano. I'm a functional piano player. I write my songs on it. I can find my chords, and I know how I want things to sound and go. When it comes time to record or perform, I'd hire guys that do it really well, or artists that do it well, girls or whoever that do it really well. But I know enough that I can articulate what I want. I know the vocabulary, and yeah, I can communicate that. So it
So
comes in hand.
your mom putting you into those piano lessons, it wasn't all
Yeah,
for naught, right?
yeah. But at the time, I didn't like it, but now I look back and I'm grateful for it, and I wish I'd have kept it up even more than I did. But it's fine. I like. I'm not trying to be a virtuoso at any of those other instruments, but I just like that it ex, it expands my palette, my musical palette, knowing other instruments and how they function, their characteristics, and and I know that I can articulate that to a producer or to that person on that instrument that's going to try and realize my vision. You know,
So before you figured out that music is what you want to dedicate your life to, if I were to ask you as a kid, if I were to ask you what you wanted to be when you grew up, what do you think your answer would have been?
my answer would be music, day one.
That early?
Yep. Now the
You,
thing is, my parents, old school, immigrants that came here to escape a bad situation in South Africa, and like most immigrant parents, they want the best for their kids, obviously, but they're also seeking opportunities that may not have been possible where they came from. So my parents were like, I was good in math in school, so they were all excited that I'm going to be some doctor or scientist or whatever, and I kind of appeased them a little while, made them think, but I knew full on as a kid, I'm going to be a musician. I knew that, you know. So yeah, there was never any doubt in my mind.
if I were to meet you at 12 years old, who would I be meeting? What is Tony like at 12?
Oh man, you know, I'm a bit of a joker. Uh, I was kind of like, okay, great. So 12, you're grade eight. Yeah, you're around in grade eight. Yeah. So I was always like a class president, class leader guy, but I would frustrate the teacher because they saw that in me, but at the same time, I was also pretty disruptive. Not in a like a negative, destructive, violent kind of way or bullying kind of way, but just like in a, being disruptive, outbursts, trying to be funny, So I was the kind of guy always on the outside looking in. I was never in any kind of clique or group. I was always the guy that could sort of navigate between different groups, and this group wouldn't talk to that group, but I could talk to both of them, you know? So I was always that guy. So yeah.
You were outgoing and confident, or
Yeah,
shy,
a bit
or
both. I was
okay.
both. I mean, I had my insecurities like any 12-year-old. I mean, I was pretty awkward looking at that age when you're kind of starting to evolve into what you're going to look like as an adult. It took a long time. I was a late bloomer and a slow bloomer, so you get self-conscious about things. So I had my insecurities like any other adolescent does. But one of the things that gave me confidence was music and a love of it, and knowing that I thought at the time that I was good at it, so that gave me a lot of confidence.
And with that proficiency with the drums and music, did that give you kind of opportunities and chances to meet people? And I guess for me as a musician, I found that it kind of opened doors where maybe you'd be too shy to talk to people, but they're also musicians, so that's an in with them. Or suddenly you're playing at someone's little house party or at a
Yeah,
campfire, and normally you'd be too shy to speak up, and
yeah,
here somehow you're able to make friends because you're the cool guy that plays music.
yeah. It's like it's funny because I got to start playing with guys that were older than me, and who, like my group of friends were like, those are the really cool kids, and they were older, and I guess they saw something in me, and they kind of took me under their wing, and I was able to play with them. So that also, for the other kids to go, oh, that Rabalao, he must be pretty cool if he's hanging with that guy, you know. Um, but it's and it's part of, like, I've always kind of come up with older musicians sort of taking me under their wing, and now I think I'm kind of turning it around and trying to be that guy for other musicians coming up. And that's part of the reason why I even started that the open mic stuff, so that younger musicians could have a chance to express themselves and feel nurtured and feel supported. So it's just kind of a bit of a paying it forward, giving it back kind of thing.
So that was you at 12.
Yeah.
If you and I were friends at 16
Yeah.
and you invited me over to listen to some music, what albums would you be spinning? What do you think?
Oh, there'd be some Tears for Fears in there. There'd still be some Rush. There'd be some Prince.
Okay. All right.
There'd be, what else? I started having a appreciation from, that's when the Beatles started to go. I think my dad was onto something here. I was
These
starting to
guys are
mature.
pretty good.
Yeah, my palate was expanding at that point. Sometimes when you're younger, you kind of, it's almost like a cliquey thing. Like, me and my buddies just listen to this, and if you listen to that, you're not one of us. And I was starting to break out of that at that age, which is good, because I think people should just leave themselves open to just enjoy what is good, and good comes in all kinds of shapes, sizes, and forms if you're just open to checking it out.
So I've one final question about growing up, and then we'll dive into the start of Joydrop.
Okay.
Most musicians, we're told that you got to get that good education, that good job. Being a musician, that is a pipe dream. Nobody
Yeah.
makes it. Did you ever have to deal with that kind of resistance from family or friends? And if so, how did you overcome it to go on to have such a successful music career?
Yeah, for sure I did, because like I said, my parents were kind of old school, had that sort of mentality of we've come to this land of opportunity, escaping something bad. So we want you to take advantage of that academically, and then make that transfer into a career that they see as, legitimate. You know, music was not for them. To them, it was always it was like a hobby. So yeah, I faced a lot of resistance, but um, growing up, I was a good kid. I mean, you get in trouble like anything else, but it was never like, come and get me out of jail, or I'm being suspended from school, or that kind of stuff. It was like, yeah, what? I didn't clean up my room, or, I came in an hour after curfew, that kind of bad. So that, coupled with my approach, um, they had to it forced them to put their stereotypes of what being a musician is aside, because they know I'm not that guy. So all the stereotypes, and you know them just as well as I do, of overindulgence and lack of, boundaries or discipline. Music is, the amount of time I've put into music, I could be a neurosurgeon 3 times over, So if you're serious about it, you're going to put the work into it. You're going to take it seriously. You're going to take care of your body, take care of your mind, never stop growing and learning. And there's a lot of discipline that goes into it. People see a certain side of it and think that's what it's about. And they see overindulgence. They see, I don't know, that whole rock and roll, quote unquote, lifestyle thing. It's there, but if you're really serious about it, you stay focused. And I think it's funny. I think the first time my parents saw me on TV, they're like, "Oh, okay, now maybe it's for real." That kind of legitimized it for them a little bit.
Yeah, it's crazy. All the big artists I've interviewed, for most of them, it took like winning a Juno or winning a Grammy or having like a #1 single. It took one of those things for the parents to come around and be like, "Oh, okay, this isn't just a hobby. They're pretty good at what they do."
Yep.
Do you think your parents were just happy that of all the things you could be doing as a teenager, that you were dedicated to music, which is a beautiful creative thing, versus spending time, 8 hours a day out with friends, skateboarding, and I don't know, smoking or whatever?
Yeah, well, on the one hand, they liked that it provided me with a focus that, I wasn't getting into trouble. But at the same time, it kind of made them a little nervous. It was like, maybe they could hear me in the basement practicing my drums. And I remember my dad saying to me, I can hear you down there. You're getting good. And I could tell that he was a bit nervous, because he's like, he's getting good, and it might click in his mind that this is something he wants to do. And I'm thinking, listen, Pops, I'm way ahead of you. I've already long decided that. I just didn't tell you. Right. So
yeah, he's thinking he doesn't want you to get any funny ideas here.
Yeah, but I already had the idea long before that.
Yeah, that's too funny. So as we jump into the history of Joydrop, I have some kind words sent in from someone that was there near the beginning. So
okay,
this is from Trevor Hurst, the singer for Econoline Crush.
Awesome.
And he has a story here. So he says, I met Tony when Joydrop opened for Econoline Crush on a Canadian tour. Watching him drum is so much fun. The man is a machine, but with a soul. He locks into that groove. That was such a fun tour because of their band and their great musicianship. So from Trevor Hurst to Econoline Crush.
Awesome. That was actually our first, like after we got signed and our record, I'm not even sure if it was, I think it might have just got released. That was our first tour with Econoline Crush in Canada. It was an awesome tour. They were, they were blowing up in Canada. We were fans of theirs. Like it wasn't just like
they were huge.
It wasn't just the industry machine going, let's put these guys together. We were like, we want to play with these guys because they're great. And it was a great fit. There was another band called BTK that was also on that tour, as I recall. And it was a cross Canada tour. It was a great tour. Got to know Trevor and the guys. Ziggy, rest his soul, he was one of the guys who passed away maybe about a year ago. And it was, we Joydrop was interesting because when we got together, we almost made it like a job in terms of we would rehearse about 5 hours a day, 5 days a week. Like we made it like a schedule, like, okay, 12 to 5, Monday to Friday, we're rehearsing this is before we got signs, before we had any gigs. We had some songs, and we just would rehearse it. So by the time we started playing live, we already had that sort of, we were already tuned up and ready to go in terms of our chops and our tightness. And then, there's certain things that you can only get from playing live. And that first tour really kind of solidified what we had already sort of taken to a certain point, and then the touring aspect of it just kicked us up to another notch. And I listen, I'm not gonna lie to you, man. We were a badass live band. We were, we were like, because we did the work,
That's awesome. Surprisingly, even though I was a fan of Econoline Crush, back in the day at their peak,
Yeah.
I only saw them play a few months ago. So,
wow.
So Finger 11 just did shows in Toronto and Ottawa where they were recording a live album and DVD.
Right.
And I've been lucky enough to do 4 interviews with different members on the podcast. And I went out, and it was a Econoline Crush opening for them in Ottawa here at the Bronson Center. So
Nice.
that's where I finally saw them play, and I met Trevor, and that's crazy. All these years I hadn't seen them until now. So I'm glad they're still doing it.
Yeah, same. I haven't seen them since. I haven't seen them live since that first tour that we did. And I see Trevor online, and every now and then we have a little, hey, how you doing? But I'd love to see them again. If they come to town, I'll definitely go see them.
So how did you actually meet the other members of Joydrop, and where did the idea that maybe we should start a band together come from?
So I had met a guy who's now one of my closest friends, and his name was Tom Mackay. He's also an Ottawa guy like me. And he had just moved here. And I had a friend named Kobe James, wildly talented guy, who was putting his project together. And he said, I got this guy, he's from Ottawa like you, he's going to be on bass. And what I hadn't known was that Tom had already seen me play on a jazz gig, actually. And so we came together, and me and Tom were, we hit it off immediately. Kindred spirits in terms of music, and just who he is as a person. It's like, this is my kind of guy. He works hard. He's got a passion for music. He's a great guy. He's a multi-instrumentalist. He's got that producer song. He's a song guy, And so the project that we had initially started with kind of didn't work out. I started playing with a band called Bass is Bass, and they needed a sort of a guitar player / multi-instrumental guy. And I said, I know just the guy. And so I got Tom into that gig. And while we were playing with them, we'd, on the road, on our downtime, we'd be talking about music. And I'm like, Tom, I got all these songs and I really want to do something with it. We should put this band together. Like, yeah, we should put it together. So we'd be scheming, about this thing we wanted to do, and our vision for it. We're like, yeah, I think a female vocalist would be awesome, because of kind of the way these songs are, kind of the direction they're kind of going in. And then, yeah, we after our run with them, we said, let's leave this band and devote ourselves full time to seeing our vision of this band. We didn't have a name for it yet come through. And I remember one day, Tom just said, what about Joydrop? And I'm like, that is perfect. And and that's how it started. Me and Tom, actually.
That's amazing. You've mentioned a few of your influences. When you're in a band and there's, say, 3 other members, there's other influences being brought in as well. Who would you say as a band, Joydrop as a band, who were the biggest influences on those 2 albums?
Ooh. Well, we all have a collective love of certain bands. The Beatles is definitely one of them. Bowie is another one. But it was also not just specific bands. It was what was happening at the time. So at the time, there was a lot of mixture between sort of rock and electronica was coming in. So there was rock bands playing with beats. The industrial stuff was coming in, like Nine Inch Nails.
The grunge stuff, probably.
Yeah, the grunge stuff was happening. Bands like Bjork was coming in there with her. So it was that marriage of the electronica and the rock. So we kind of like gravitated towards that sound, like, and I think that's actually one of the things that appealed to the label that actually ended up signing as Tommy Boy, was that they were looking for a band that kind of married those two things together. And so yeah, it was those sounds and that aesthetic that kind of was our, like, that's where we want to kind of go aim towards, but we want to make it our own and express it in a way that's us. And also because Thomas Paine, the guitar player in the band, he's a strong songwriter. So we had strong entities and very individual characteristics coming out to make that sound the way that it did.
And how did you attract Tommy Boy that ended up signing you guys and releasing both your albums? Was it demos you got to them? Was it you were starting to draw crowds live and they noticed you were creating a buzz? How do you attract them?
Well, the beautiful thing about when Tom and I were in Bass is Bass, because they were, Juno nominated, Juno winning band, and we had lots of touring, and they had a good run. So we took a lot of the context and the people that we met through them and used that to help us with our project. And so we got ourselves a manager, and that manager, heard our stuff. He partnered up with a guy in the States who managed the guys that produced our Bass is Bass second album. And his manager said, you know what, this Joydrop stuff sounds really good. Can I help you shop it in the States? Because our manager had more of the Canadian connects. He didn't have as many ins in the US, and that manager did. So they kind of paired up. He got the attention of Tommy Boy and Maverick, which was Madonna's label, Interscope, a bunch of labels. So when North by Northeast happened, I guess this would have been 1997, maybe. We had about 13 labels came to see us.
Wow.
Tommy Boy was one of them.
This was a showcase in Toronto or
yep,
Ottawa?
in Toronto for North by Northeast. Yep. And so we had all kinds of labels at our showcase. And the next day, Tommy Boy said, we want to take you guys out for lunch. And so we had this lunch meeting with them. And it was the A&R guy, Ian Steenan, who we're still friends with to this day. Took it back to the States, and their label went, yeah, we like these guys. We want them to do a showcase in New York. So they set up a showcase in New York. They brought the entire label out. From the president on down, Tom Silverman, who's the Tommy of Tommy Boy, his president, the whole label came down. When you get the whole label from the top down, then
they're a little interested.
They're interested. And if they sign you, it's going to be a priority because the boss wants it, right? And everybody else has to fall in line. So they came to the show. They loved it. We went to their offices, gave us all the Tommy Boy swag. They wined us, dined us, wooed us, courted us. We also had interest from Maverick. We flew a Maverick guy in here to do a showcase for him. We went to met with a guy from Interscope who was actually the bass player from Blondie.
Okay.
Nigel, I can't remember his last name, but we met with him. And then we just decided to go with Tommy Boy. They put an offer that was good. And we felt that they, were really supportive, and they had the clout, and they had, we had a top-down interest from the president down, and they would give us the attention that we needed, and they did that. They didn't make all the right moves, but they definitely poured the resources and made us a priority at the label, which is important.
And how amazing is it that not only did you get offers from labels, but these were legit labels? I mean, Tommy Boy Records went on to sell for $100 million to another label at one point. And Maverick Records, so not just that you have Madonna, the powerhouse that's behind that, but if I remember correctly, Jagged Little Pill from Alanis was on Maverick Records. And they had the early Muse albums. They dropped Muse at one point because
I didn't know that.
They didn't see the potential. So they released, I think, the first two. And it was once they dropped them that Muse actually broke through big afterwards. They thought they didn't like the falsetto that he was doing. Sounded too much like Tom York from Radiohead. And Muse still to this day is one of the biggest live touring
Yeah,
bands in the world.
totally.
So anyways, that's awesome that it's like legit labels that were interested and you got a good offer. And that leads us to the debut album. So Metasexual 1999. This comes out the year before the world was supposed to end in Y2K, and then nothing happened. The clocks on the computers literally just changed to the next day, and everything was fine. So that album comes out, and the single Beautiful is a big hit. It's a top 20 hit, even in the US on the alternative charts.
It was a bigger hit in the States than it was in Canada. Because we were, for all intents and purposes, we're an American signed band. So we were kind of presented as a US, so that the US was our major market and our influence, our major focus for promoting that album. We only toured Canada, like an actual tour of Canada, on that first album once. We did lots of shows, but an actual, tour, we only toured it once, but we toured the States endlessly.
But that's also what you want as a band. You want to focus on the US because, I mean, a gold or platinum album in the US is 10 times bigger than Canada, right? So you're probably happy to have the focus.
Oh yeah, it was great. And I mean, the US is it's a huge animal. You can focus on certain areas. So we were in the Northeast a lot. And you can just do the Northeast. You've got, 5, 6 major cities there that are all within, 4 hours of each other. And just that alone is more than the population of Canada, right? So,
you can drive across Ontario for a day and you're still in Ontario,
right? Still in Ontario, yeah. So Canada's, it's a great country, but it is hard. It is a bitch to tour. It's just, you got to drive 8 hours to get to a population center that's, 6 figures, right? So
and the winters are no fun to traverse, right? Just to further your point that the focus was on the US. So when that album and that single comes out, I'm 14 years old, and with I'm in Canada, with the focus being on the US, I actually became aware of the band with the next album, with Sometimes Want to Die, which was really big in Canada as well, right? And I actually thought to this day that Sometimes Want to Die was the first single from the second album, and Beautiful, I started hearing it after Sometimes Want to Die. I thought that was the follow-up, just to show the focus was on the US, and then came back to Canada on the next album.
Well, and the reason for that is when Sometimes Want to Die came out, well, the album hadn't even been released yet, I don't think. It was just the single was out
in advance.
And the thing is, the song is called Sometimes Want to Die. It got released at maybe August of 2001. You see where I'm going with this? And then you get September 11th, and Clear Channel had a list of songs that were going to be blacklisted because it was too sensitive, or you can't be playing this after the horrors of 9/11. So our song Sometimes Want to Die was on that. But at the time, it was shooting up. It was getting all kinds of ads at radio in the States, and was positioned to blow up even bigger than Beautiful. And then that happened, and they shut it all down in the States. And the label went, okay, well, that single's, it's not going to happen in the States. Let's focus on Canada. And that's why in Canada, we're more known for Sometimes Want to Die, and in the States, we're more known for Beautiful.
It's wild how, despite, the album is the album, the single's the single, despite that, the factors that come into play that are outside of your control, it's like you provided the hit single, and then suddenly there's the once in a lifetime 9/11 that you can't, it has nothing to do with you.
Yeah. And I mean, listen, I get that. Or if there was a meteor hit the planet, I understand that. What frustrates me is when it's people that are, in your circle, be it the label or management, when it's that which you can control, or they can control that. I can't control a meteor hitting the planet, or an earthquake, or a volcano, or 9/11. But I can certainly get on the phone with a label guy and go, what the hell are you doing? And that was happening. Beautiful was supposed to be in that movie, American Beauty.
Oh, wow.
They
That would be big.
Mendez, the director, called us up personally. He goes, I've heard your song on the radio. It's perfect for this movie I've got coming out called American Beauty. He said it's not a huge budget movie, but the cast is great, and it had that critical acclaim factor to it. The label went, nah, he's not offering us enough money. We went, are you crazy? Like, this is a great opportunity. They said no. Turns out it wins 11 Oscars, biggest selling soundtrack at the time. But that's the label going, nah. So when you're talking about the frustrations of things beyond your control, there's a perfect example. That wasn't a meteorite. That wasn't 9/11. That's some guy that's got too
human
much
error
pride
right there.
going, yeah, I don't see it. Right. And you're going, are you stupid?
And it was such a beautiful and creative and artistic movie, right?
It
It's
was.
considered one of the greatest of all times.
I
Yeah.
couldn't go see it for years. I did not go see it because I couldn't bring myself to see it.
Yeah. Oh man,
Yeah.
that's tough. So Beautiful comes out, big hit in the US.
Yeah.
What was it like hearing your music on the radio for the first time? Maybe you had some indie play before that, but this was your first like legit hit single on the radio. What was that like? Do you remember the first time hearing it? You hear stories of people like pulling over their car or like crying or like showing their mom,
Well, I remember the first time I heard it was actually on CFNY. But we knew it was going to happen. So, I mean, it was cool and I dug that, but I knew it was coming. The coolest time, I think we might have been in either Sacramento or Seattle or something. And I just remember walking down the street, somebody's driving by in a car and is blasting out of their car, which I assume was on the radio. That was like, I'll never forget that experience. You get into this business. It's not for the money. Lord, believe me, it's not for the money. But it's those little victories like that, those little experiences that make you go, okay, this is why no one can ever take that away from you. Like, other things can happen. You can get dropped. No one can like your shit. You could, whatever, bands can break up, but that no one can take away. And that kind of makes it all worth it.
So Beautiful is the band's most popular song on Spotify. It has close to 250,000 plays. Why do you think people resonated with that song? Why do you think people love that song so much?
Listen, I wrote that song, and when I wrote it, it was about me, but it was something, I think it just has a universal sentiment, and it's about, just self-worth and seeing that you have that despite all the other things that are around you that could make it difficult for you to actually see that. And you can take that and apply that to anybody, and they can find, in their own lives how it resonates with them. And I've had people, tell me that, it saved their life. There was a guy who was like, I was going to commit suicide, and I heard that song, and it changed my mind, and it changed the way that I see myself. And he wanted to thank me for that. Again, these are the things that make you go, this is why I do what I do.
Yeah, I don't think there's any more important feedback you can get than that guy saying that it saved his life. It changed his perspective, and it really spoke to him.
Yeah.
What when you think back to that debut album coming out in 1999, what thoughts, memories, emotions come back to you? I mean, that kickstarted the entire lifelong adventure that you've been on since then.
Yeah. And, it was, I mean, we knew when we finished the album, we knew, like, okay, no matter what anybody thinks, no matter what the industry does, and all the different factors that have to come to play for it to actually see the light of day and actually do something, have an impact on society or the population. No matter what happens, we love this album. Like, we did something good here, and we knew that, and we knew that if people could just hear it, not everyone's going to like it, but enough people will that, it's going to have an impact, and it's going to do something. So we started touring. They put us to work. We toured endlessly. Like I said, we probably did 250 shows in a year. Wow. And Tara Sloan, who's the lead singer, and one of my closest friends, she wasn't used to that. she was not prepared for that. So it was tough on her. And but me and Tom were like, awesome, keep it coming. Because we were more seasoned than she was, and we knew the ins and outs and the ups and downs of touring life, and I love it. So it quickly dawned on us that, okay, this is actually gathering steam, and you're going to be living out of your suitcase for a couple of years here, and that's actually what happened. But it was great. I loved it.
So in preparation for this interview, I went back, I listened to your entire discography. So the two Joydrop albums, the two solo albums, the Bedouin albums. And if you're cool with it, I'd like to dive into a few specific songs from this debut album. Is that cool?
Yeah.
Awesome. So the song Fizz. So the drums are so snappy. The verses are basically just drums and bass with a little guitar, but it's drums and bass that are locked in. How important is it for the rhythm section to just be like tight, tight, tight,
It is. I mean, you can be loose, but it's still got to be tight. You got to be loose together, right? But it's the foundation of the house. And if you build a house on sand, it's going to crumble. So it's got to have a strong foundation. And if you do, you can stack up any amount of things on top of it, and Tom and I, because we'd played together before, and we'd known each other musically. Probably one of the bass players I played with more than any other is Tom Mackay. So we knew each other quite well. So it was easy for us to kind of lock in and just set that solid foundation that we could build the rest of the tracks on top of. And all that stuff, like, a lot of that stuff is live off the floor. It wasn't like, just do the drums. It was a lot of that stuff was live off the floor. That album, there was not one computer on it until the mastering phase. Everything else was Neve console, 2-inch tape. Even the mixing was done by hand on a Neve, old school style. And editing was done by cutting tape. Our producer, Ron St. Germain, amazing producer, amazing guy. We're all still quite close to this day. Old school guy, man. He's got that old school analog mentality. His records sound great. He did Soundgarden, Bad Motorfinger. He did Tool. He did. He's done a lot of great albums.
At 18, I went to school for audio engineering, and I still have nightmares of having to splice tape, physically. With Pro Tools, where you can zoom in and edit and undo, it's so beautiful. So anytime someone mentions that they recorded to tape, I get like this little nightmare flashback of, it was the tail end of it was kind of phasing out. So they had us just do a little bit of tape splicing in case it's still happening,
Yeah. And I remember us watching him do it. We were like, because we had the song. It's like, if you mess this up, we got to do this again, right? Yeah. So but he's just, don't worry about it. He just doesn't even think about it. Like, he's a surgeon. He's like a pro at it, man. It was awesome to watch.
I love that you mentioned that you guys recorded mostly live off the floor, because here are my notes for the song Breakdown. I wrote live sounding drum kit. Doesn't sound like it's all chopped up and quantized. So it's exactly what you said. The whole album, it sounds like a live drum kit just playing.
Yeah. I remember there was one song, I think it's The Line, I think, is on Metasexual, where we're playing it. It was to a click. We played to a click, but it wasn't. None of that stuff was put on a grid and quantized. And partway through the song, maybe about 3/4, the click ran out on the tape, but we kept on playing it. That's the take that is on the album. So you couldn't even tell, because we were so dialed in at the time. And that's the beauty about the analog thing. Things are gonna breathe. Your heart doesn't beat in perfect time and stay there. Things got to breathe, and that's what that human element is. What brings out the emotion in the music. Music today is just, it is so precise and rigid, even without the old auto tuning thing, and everything's perfect. Things in nature aren't like that. You don't see straight lines in nature and right angles, right? We make that. The most beautiful things are the things that just exist naturally, organically. And music, I like the marriage of both of those things. Use it as a tool, not as a crutch, is my point, right?
So as one of the principal songwriters for the song Beautiful, that song, when it gets to the chorus, there's some production stuff that comes in. So I have good headphones on, I'm listening. And when it really picks up and gets heavier in the chorus, there's some higher frequencies that come in, and it's like a pad or keys or something. Do you know what I'm talking about? I'm just curious what makes that production sound that's extra ear candy, extra intensity when the chorus kicks in.
Yeah, well, there's a synth thing, goes doo-wee, doo-wee. There's that guy. I think they've got Tara's vocal going through some kind of filter, so it sounds like it's got that radio distortion thing on it. There's some kind of there's all these things that make it go from here to here, right? And then the riff kicks in. It was just, that was the whole thing about that song. It's like, it's how it leads up to that point, and then when that point hits, because it's not just, you can go loud and soft, it's easy, but you have to also emotionally go there too, right? Otherwise it's just a cheap trick. But if it's written into the music dynamically, it builds lyrically and emotionally, and then it goes big because that's where it is emotionally. And I think that's also part of the hook, is that you've hit the emotional, sort of the payoff part, but it was written in the music, not just an engineering or mixing or production trick, right?
I wrote down that I really like the song Spiders, that the drums and bass again were really locked in on that song. Several of the songs on the album sound like they're programmed drums. My question is, are there programmed drums on the album, or is it you've played the drums and then they're edited and tampered with afterwards to have the electronic sound?
Yeah, on that one, I think there's a song called yeah, well, I can't remember what it's called, but
is it that Over one, and Under? Or
no, Over and Under has no programmed drums. Until is my drums slowed down, slowed the tape down. But most of it's just my drums manipulated after the fact, live. So
okay.
I think, again, it's like, I think it's an interesting way to approach to try to achieve the same thing, but do it in a more organic way. And however you want to do it, it's fine. Like, I've got nothing against programmed drums. I think they're great too.
It's just another tool in your,
it's how you want to use it. But again, like, these things shouldn't be a go-to or a crutch, or just because it's there. It's like, what's best for the song, I'm perfectly fine if it's best for the song to have programmed drums and no real drums at all. Or how about no drums at all in this song? I'm fine with that. It's just, you got to serve the song. I'm of that mentality all the time.
So I have two final questions about the debut album, and then we'll move on to the next one. So for the song Over and Under, there's this really catchy, crunchy groove going on in the verses. Mm-hmm. Where does that sound come from? Just for me, I'm listening and I love it. And whenever it's not a traditional instrument, like, okay, I know that's not bass or that's not guitar. Yeah. So just that really crunchy, catchy thing in the verse. I'm just curious, what's creating these sounds?
It's interesting because I wrote that song, and that song is a synth-based riff that you're talking about. That's how this song started. That's the first thing I wrote when I wrote that song, was that synth-based riff, and then I built everything else on top.
I'd build a song around that part too if I came up with it.
Yeah. So that's how it started. That's the main theme of the song. And it's got a sinister element to it. It sounds very sinister and heavy. Like, I love synth bass, So that's how that whole thing came about.
So when we first started talking about Joydrop, you mentioned that another band member said, "Hey, how about Joydrop for a band name?" So the final song on the album is called Until, and there's a lyric, "Until the joy drops again." So I'm curious, did the lyric, the song, or the band name come first?
Band name came first. That's Tom Mackay. That song, actually, Tom Mackay wrote. And he just wanted to, it was like, just like a tribute to the band. It's just like, I think it's the last song on the album.
Yeah.
I haven't listened to that album in so long. I think it's the last song on the album, but it's just a nice way to bookend the album and wrap things up with a nice little bow. And yeah, that's a Tom Mackay song right there.
So the next album Vibrate comes out in 2001. What was your life like at the peak of Sometimes Wanna Die? The peak of that being a hit single, the album being at its peak. Were you on the road a lot? Like, what was going on in your life? Because most people don't know what it's like to have a hit
Yeah,
single or a hit album. So for the rest of us peasants, we just want to know what that moment is like, you
it was
know?
pretty cool because I think that song went top 10 here, and but the video, we had Tommy Lee in our video, and it went to #1 on Much Music. And so the combination of the top 10 on airplay and the #1 video, and I remember that's the time when video was kind of king at the time. It dictated a lot of radio as opposed to the other way around. So yeah, it was an exciting time. It was we toured with Big Wreck on that album,
Amazing.
and that's to this day one of the most fun I've had on tour. Crazy fun musical. We'd go out and listen to them after our set every night. Great band, and we're all still friends to this day. But it was a good time, fun time. Again, it's just a shame that that 9/11 had the effect that it did on its success in the States. But for Canada, it was great, and lots of touring, and we got a Juno nomination out of that. And yeah, it was a good time. And um, I just wish again that had 9/11 not happened, who knows what would have happened south of the border here.
Yeah, it's crazy. You can see beside me, I have the Big Wreck album.
Yeah,
So this is my wall of fame. So my favorite 12 albums from guests that I've had on the podcast,
yeah,
and Big Wreck is there from the Sekou interviews. We'll talk about Sekou a little bit later. There's a
yeah,
segue that we'll that we'll go through. When you mentioned having Tommy Lee in the music video, so that was my first taste of Joydrop. So I was 16 when that video comes out. That's the first
right.
time I became aware of the band. And all this time until basically right now, preparing for this interview, I assumed because Tommy Lee was in the video and you guys were signed to Tommy Boy Records, I thought that
Right.
was Tommy Lee's record label.
Oh,
This
I can see
whole
it.
time, just because
Yeah.
of you guys, I thought Tommy Lee had this like
Yeah.
insane successful record label as well.
Yeah.
So
No, it was when that single, when we had recorded the album, and then the label said, okay, that's, this is going to be the single. Let's shoot a video. They said, what? Let's have a cameo in it. So they were throwing some names out there, and then they said, what about Tommy Lee? And this is around the time he had just had the whole Pamela Anderson thing had happened, and he had actually a kid drowned in his pool. All this was happening at the same time, so he was in a bit of a slump, you know. And we said, "Well, do you think he'd want to do it after all the stuff he's been through? Maybe he doesn't want to have his face shown like that." And they said, "Well, we'll ask him," because we used to, remember Everlast?
absolutely. That was Everything to Everyone was my favorite song as a kid. I would
Yeah,
sit by the radio waiting for it. Yeah, I had that album. So much for the Afterglow. They're
yeah, it's
so
great.
good.
Yeah, so his manager was also Tommy Lee's manager.
Okay.
So he said, "Well, you know what? Let me ask Tommy if he wants to do it." And it was one of those things like, yeah, I'll see. Even if he says yes, I'll see it when I believe it. When we show up to the video shoot and he's there, then I'll believe it. So we shot it in LA, and sure enough, we get there. They said, "Okay, Tommy's here." He said, all he asks is that you don't mention Pamela Lee Anderson, and everything's gonna be cool. And he was so cool. We had a great time. We hung out with him for like that whole weekend, and yeah, and even that he also does DJing, and so we'd cross paths every now and then. He'd say, "Hey, I'm in whatever town we'd be in." He's like, "I'm DJing. You guys want to hang out?" We go hang out with him. He came and DJ'd at an event at the Revival, called us up. We hung out with him then. So we stayed in touch for, a couple of years after that, and haven't heard from him since. But great guy, nice guy.
You mentioned that this album brought you guys a Juno nomination. So this was for Best New Group. What does that Juno nomination mean to you? To have, this is Canada's Grammys, to have your country acknowledge your talent, your creativity, your hard work. What does that mean to you?
it meant a lot. You know, it's you put all this work into something that you really believe in and that you think is worthy of being acknowledged and appreciated. And then when the industry comes together and go, yeah, we recognize that and we're acknowledging that, you know, you don't need it, but it feels good. You know, it does feel good, and it makes you feel like, yeah, you know, we're doing something good here. We're doing something right, whether you win it or not. But you know, it's these little things that help you just, you know, reassure you that you're on the right path. You know.
So listening to this album, early songs on the album like Thick Skin, Life on the Sun, Expiry Dates, right away.
You know, it's funny. Can I just interject?
Yeah, go ahead.
Most of the songs you mentioned are the ones that I wrote. It's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
These are the ones that stand. Maybe we have the same taste. I don't know.
Maybe. Yeah.
So those songs right away, it becomes apparent to me that this album sounds higher quality, more polished. Was there a bigger budget? After the success of Beautiful on the first album, was there a bigger budget for the recording going into this one?
Recording wise, it probably cost a little bit more than the other one. I mean, it wasn't cheap, and we went all out. We spared no expense on this one. We recorded it in Vancouver at the Warehouse and at the Armory. We had Garth Richardson produced it. We had Randy Staub mixed it, who does a lot of Bob Rock stuff. We had what's his name? Bob Ludwig mastered it. We've spared no expense at it. So that's why it sounds the way that it does, But again, production ain't going to save you if the songs aren't there. And we felt that they were.
It's funny. All the albums I listened to preparing for these interviews, Bob Ludwig comes up on almost every album that when I see who mastered it, which is crazy. And with Garth, I always say I have three favorite albums of all time. One of them is Rage Against the Machine's self-titled debut in 1991. And just the fact that Garth produced and mixed, I believe he at least produced it.
Yeah.
It's like the fact that I talk to this guy every now and then, it blows my mind. Like I try not to fangirl, just with the work he's done. So
yeah. Oh yeah. He's got that lineage. His dad was an amazing producer. He's an awesome producer. And we got to hang out with him for few months in Vancouver, got to know him well. We're still friends to this day, and he used to talk about, he's got one of the things I love about, the business and the industry and the people that come cross paths with you. It's just, you get to hear their stories, and everybody's got their stories and their path and the journeys that they take. So it's always fascinating to hear stories of stuff that about, and how did this come about and how did that come about, and you exchange these things with people, and so it's like getting to see how the sausage is made, because most of the time you just see a final product and not to get to hear the stories, the trials and the tribulations and the pain and the blood, sweat, tears that go along to make that thing.
The Wizard of Oz behind the curtain there, making the magic.
Yep.
So Life on the Sun, I love the drums on this song. So the verses are like really intense and driving, and then the chorus is like a halftime and really heavy. Was that one of the most fun songs to play live as a band when you guys were touring?
Yeah, it's got that live feel. Like, I mean, when we were recording, you kind of have that in mind a little bit. Like, you can picture yourself playing that live, and it's a big song, it's got big sound, and you can picture it filling up a venue. And it's a fun one to play live. I from a lot of the feedback that I get, like yourself, that's a lot of people's favorite songs on that album too.
So as I'm listening to those two albums, I feel like I'm getting these Easter eggs, because like I can step back and see things across multiple albums. So at the end of the first album, the song Until,
Right.
had the homage to the band's name. And
Yeah.
when we get to the end of this album, the last song is Metasexual, which is
Right.
the name of the first album. So my question is it the same thing where the song is an homage to the first album, or was the song written during the first album but didn't make that album and then was added to the second album? These are
Yeah.
the
No.
questions that keep me up at night, Tony.
Well, I shall ease your mind and let you have a good night's sleep.
All right.
Metasexual, being the title of the first album, Thomas Paine, the guitar player, came up with the title. Metasex, there was some philosopher, writer guy who came up with this concept about sex not for procreation, but for pleasure or for anything but procreation, which, most animals, it's
only for
procreation.
procreation, yeah.
And it's a seasonal thing. It's like, the rut for like elk and deer in the fall, or whereas humans, it's not for procreation. It's actually for almost on a lot of ways everything else but that. And so I guess it was studying that. It had that concept had a cool concept, and also the word rings well. Is like, that sounds intriguing. It sounds like something you want to look into. So he came out, he heard that, and then we decided that that'll be the title of the album. And then I guess after that, he decided, I'm going to write a song based on that, which he did. And that's, so the title came first and then the song.
What do you think made Tara such a great front woman? You didn't in rock and in heavier music, it's mostly male dominated. So yeah. she was kind of like your secret weapon or something that she helped the band stand out, and a great captivating front woman who's gone on to great success in other things. Yep. What do you think made her such a great front woman for Joydrop?
Well, she was the last to join the band. She was the missing puzzle piece. We had things in place. We had songs written. We had actually tried a couple singers out before her, and they just didn't have it. There was something missing. Something, they could sing, but they just didn't have that something. And she walked into the room, and it was like, even before she opened her mouth, like, she's got something. I mean, yeah, she's a beautiful woman, but besides that, she had this energy, this vibe about her that's very captivating and powerful. And she's all that. She's a beautiful woman. She's smart. She's fearless. And I think her fearlessness is one of the things that makes her a great front woman. And this is at the time, like we alluded to, we were talking about the Woodstock '99. It's around the time when, there's a lot of douchebags out, a lot of douchebaggery going around on in those days. Guys were, like, very inappropriate a lot of the time.
The toxic masculinity, and Limp Bizkit was like the front band for all that.
Exactly, and they were fueling it. So we'd go on. She because she's the lead singer, she'd have to do a lot of the interviews. And at the time, the disc jockeys, the DJs at the radio stations, they were just like that. They'd be like, "Yeah, so what's your vagina look like?" And saying just being shit like that all the time, right? And she doesn't suffer fools. So, and guys in the audience was saying shit to her or being inappropriate with the girls around them that she could see it. She'd call them on it, and then she'd get back to the mic and just kick their asses. And she was fearless and confident. She had a great presence on stage, and she's a cool rock chick. She loves rock music. She loved it. She embodied it. She embraced it. She just took it on and ran with it. And it was great. And it was great to watch. And it's a great energy to be around. And, as a drummer and, one of the founding guys of the band, to sit behind that and know that everyone's got their role in the band. And there was no weak link, and her being, the face of the band, because she is, she's got to step up and represent, and she did that fearlessly, and it was amazing to be around and watch that.
So I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't get some words from the great and powerful Tara Slone. So singer from Joydrop, TV host, doing amazing things in the hockey world now. She sent in quite a bit to say about Tony. So here we go. Tony Rabalao is one of my best friends on this planet. Everyone calls him Rabs. but I call him Tones. A soulmate in the truest meaning of the word. He has one of the biggest hearts I've ever known, a razor sharp and contagious sense of humor, and a vast intellect that at times is outside of our dimension. Musically, the man is a genius. Tricky, clever, shifty, perfection with lyrics, melody, and rhythm. Tony has a touch for songwriting that puts him among the best ever. It actually pisses me off that more people don't know how fucking good he is. I guess she has a dirty mouth like you. You guys deserve each other.
Like a trucker, yeah.
And as a drummer, well, he is the badassest. I know that's not a word she says. He's the most badass drummer in the land, full stop. That's from Tara Sloan.
Awesome. Yeah, she's awesome. And yeah, you know, it's funny because when you're in it, in that bubble, and you're spending, you know, every day, all the time in close quarters, you know, people can start to, you start to see, you know, the things that you can easily irritate each other. And when we were in the band at the time, it was so pressure and the amount of time we spent together, we couldn't really appreciate it and see it for what it was. And it wasn't until the band sort of, you know, went our separate ways and put things on the shelf that we actually became really good friends, because we didn't have that added pressure, and we could just sort of we were outside of it, and we could just see each other for who we were as people. And we became very good friends after the fact. I mean, we were always friends during, but like, again, it's like a family, and families, you know, you live in the same house, you know, it's like, you know, who left the milk carton in there with no milk in it, you know, or who didn't do this or who didn't do that. You start getting at each other a little bit. And then when you can step outside of it and actually see the person for who they are and get to appreciate that, it was an amazing thing. And to this day, we're still the best of friends. Yeah.
So in 2017, you guys got back together, you reunited for a few performances. How good did it feel to be playing again after all those years? And for the fans, is there any chance at any more shows? I'm asking for a friend.
Yeah, well, one, it felt amazing. It was a great experience. It felt like getting on a bike. It's just like, oh, here we are again. You know, it felt like you know, like nothing had changed, and we were just picking up where we left off. We added one or two extra members just to fill out the sound a little bit on stage, but yeah, it was a great experience. It felt so good to play those songs again. It had been so long, and yeah, there's a good chance we're gonna play again. We play when we can. She's got a crazy schedule. She lives in San Jose, California right now.
She got an amazing opportunity with the Sharks, right?
With the Sharks,
she's doing some big things.
So she's still got the music thing going, and she's doing a lot of TV stuff and sports stuff. And Tom is a very busy producer. He's a great producer, so he's always busy. I'm doing a lot of touring, and so, you know, it's just trying to work out our schedules. But when we see a little window of opportunity of you know, maybe we could, you know, do a show. Actually, this year is our 25th anniversary of Beautiful and Metasexual, I believe. Yes, it is. So we're thinking about doing something for that to commemorate that. So yeah, I'd say look out sometime this year, maybe in the fall around there or something, for us to do something, a show or something, you know.
That's amazing. I was talking to her and I said that she's living the dream because she can cover hockey in the middle of winter and then go outside and get a tan. Like she figures, she somehow crafted like the perfect
She figured it out. Yeah, she figured it out. It's awesome. Actually, I'll be going out there in a bit, do a bit of writing and see what happens. But yeah, San Jose. Yeah.
Amazing. So let's dive into your solo career, to your two solo albums. Mm-hmm. I guess what I'd like is we have listeners that listen to every single episode, regardless of who the guest is. Right. For our listeners that maybe haven't had a chance to listen to the two Lalo albums, mm-hmm. how would you describe your music, which is like a little taste tester to send them over to Spotify to listen or to buy after the interview? That's
a tough question, but I would say it's got it's the rock records, but there's an element of soul, and it's a little piece of everything that I'm into. So it's song driven, but it definitely has there's an edge to it. It's rock with a bit of soul in there. Um, you know, as a writer, my influences are like the Beatles, Tears for Fears. So I love melody. Uh, so there's always a strong element of that in every song. And lyrics, man, like you got to say something. I don't do throwaway lyrics. I mean, they might not mean something to you, but they mean something to me. And you know, so I think if you like the craft of songwriting, and you like melody, and there's something there for you if you're a lyric person that focuses on lyric. If you're more into like listening to the music aspect of things, there's that too. It's carefully crafted and carefully thought out, and it's expression of who I am. So, and I think I'm all right. So I think you'll like it.
There you go. When you perform the Lalo material live,
Yeah.
you're playing guitar and singing as opposed to drums. Are there certain things you love more about being the front man with guitar and vocals versus the drums? And are there kind of on the other side, are there things you love more about being at the back on the drum kit? Like you
Yeah,
have
yeah,
a rare insight into both of those. Can you give
yeah.
kind of maybe the difference or what you like or don't like
They're
about
two
both?
completely different animals, and I think, well, one of the first things I noticed the first time I did it was when you're the singer, when you're the front person, they watch everything you do. Like their eyes are on you constantly. As a drummer, people sometimes, they notice the drummer. If you do something crazy, they'll watch you, but they're not watching you. Maybe other drummers are, but the majority of the crowd is not. And as a singer, between songs, even if you take a sip of water, they're still watching you. And it was like, it was very kind of made me very self-conscious at first. And I realized how difficult it is to do that. Actually, there's a song on my first album called An Apology, and I wrote that for Tara because, we were a bit hard on her at times on that first tour because, like I told you before, she wasn't used to that touring life as we were. So she had to make that adjustment, and sometimes me and Tom could get a little bit impatient with her. And it wasn't until I started singing that I realized how difficult that is to do it and do it well. And yeah, it's a different perspective. And also there's this whole thing about what do you do with dance? Like if I don't have a guitar, sometimes I don't. I'm just me and a microphone. Sometimes you get a little self-conscious. You got to just get into it, do it, and lose yourself, and then you forget about all that stuff, and then you just channel the music that you're singing and what you wanted, what your intention was when you were expressing that emotion, and then you can just lose yourself in the moment and do that. And I really enjoy that part of it. You know, being a drummer, it's a different perspective. You've got the power. You're the loudest thing in the room, and you carry so much weight and power. You just stomp on the bass drum, and you hear it fill up the whole hall, or the crack is a snare, and what you do. It affects people to the core. And if they're dancing, it's because of you, and if they're not dancing, it might be because and you are the generator of energy and the shifter of vibes. So it's a big role to have. But if you're up for the task and you're feeling it, it feels amazing. No one dances to someone singing. They dance to someone. They dance to a beat, to somebody drumming. So it's a powerful position to be in, and it feels really, really good.
You mentioned earlier that you're a fan of Dave Grohl. What's great about what Dave Grohl has done is he's kind of created this template where a drummer can go from being the drummer in a band to being the front man on guitar, vocals, and songwriting, and show that you could do both and be in two of the biggest bands of all time and be critically acclaimed and successful. I think that's awesome. That's kind of the template that you're able to follow as well. Yeah. And it opened the doors that, maybe in the past people would say, well, the critics, you're a drummer, why don't you just stay behind a drum kit? And it's now you see like, well, if people are telling Dave Grohl to stay behind a drum kit, we would have lost out on one of the great bands.
Exactly. Yeah. And, I mean, if you're a creative soul, then you're going to express yourself in any way that you can. And if you can express yourself in other ways, like singing or writing or playing guitar and drumming, then why limit yourself just because it brings other people comfort to try to, pigeonhole you in this one little thing? And for me, I'm just a creative person, and my creative outlets are drumming, yes, and singing and writing songs and putting sounds together, and that's just an expression of me. And I see no reason why I need to be defined by just one thing, and people shouldn't limit themselves to that, if they have a passion for other things, and they can do it. I go, by all means, do it.
You gave us a little bit of insight about the song An Apology. So let's just dive into that first album. So Zigzag comes out in 2007. My two favorite songs are Something Missing and Just Like You. Nice. And An Apology, I wrote down that it has a cool Pink vibe, Pink Floyd kind of vibe. Are you actually a fan of Pink Floyd?
I am a fan of Pink Floyd. Yeah. That song, it was one of those ones that came quick. Like some of my favorite songs of mine are the ones that, was kind of like you just reached up into the ether and you pulled something down and it got channeled through you and it happened quick. You didn't have to think about it too much. I mean, you can labor over songs and, they can be amazing too. But I find that when you open yourself up and you let it come through you and you don't get in your own way, those are some of the best creative moments that you'll have, and oftentimes the ones that resonate the most with listeners.
I'm going to make a comment that might hit or it might miss. So let me know if I'm completely off here. Were you ever a fan of Silverchair or Daniel Johns, the singer of Silverchair?
No, not really. The Australian band, right?
Right. Yeah. They made it big. So way back, their debut album, Frog Stomp, 1994, every band was getting signed to be the next Nirvana, right?
Exactly.
They had Nevermind and then In Utero 94. So it's at the peak. And Silverchair, they were 14 years old when they got signed and Frog Stomp came out, and they were the next big thing. And they were amazing. I love them. The reason why I was asking is when I listened to both of the solo albums, despite different influences, the main thing that came to me is Daniel Johns. So they started as grunge, and then over the years, Silverchair really opened up. You could hear the genius of Daniel Johns as a songwriter, and he was kind of like Billy Corgan and the Smashing Pumpkins, where there's on one album like Millencolin and the Infinite Sadness, you hear an array of like piano ballads and acoustic and metal and all these things. So Daniel Johns is very much like that, and your albums, you have such unique sonic choices, and you can really hear the musicality, and there's this super wide palette of sounds and genres. And it was the later Silverchair albums where they really expanded on the sound. It's like there's kind of like Beach Boys stuff going on.
Really? I didn't know that. Maybe I got to give them a second listen.
So way later, like near their breakup, they have an album, Young Modern, is where they really, like, you wouldn't even recognize Silverchair anymore. So that was what came to me as the biggest comparison I could make. And I'm basically saying you have such musicality and a wide palette, and it's a compliment.
On that level, yes, I can totally understand. Now I don't know Silverchair that much, except for the stuff I remember when
the early grunge stuff,
the grungy stuff, and which didn't really resonate with me. But when you're saying that to me, then you're piquing my interest. I'm actually going to go and listen to that, because that to me, bands have a lot of artists and bands. Yeah, they have a core. There's a certain core, definitive sort of sound that may have made them popular or how they got their start. But then they go out, they expand their palette, they expand their horizons. I mean, let's just listen to the Beatles, for example. I mean, to go from, Please Please Me to Sgt. Pepper, And I love when artists just open themselves up to being free to express their musicality, and they're not afraid of alienating certain elements of their fans or their industry or whatever, their label, and they just do what makes them feel happy and expresses, you know, their creativity. So having said that, yes, I'll respect the silver chair for that. And
Yeah,
I'll check it
I'll
out.
accept this comment. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I guess sometimes it's when artists are brand new, they're still just trying to make it and make a living and make a name for themselves. And sometimes they provide an album or music that is what they think will be popular. And it's like once they've given the label what they want and the label's made money, it's like
Yeah.
then you actually see who they are and they start expanding on their sound
Yeah.
because they kind of earn that freedom.
Yeah. And you know what? And I kind of, um, we're not in an era of albums so much anymore, and people still make albums, but people don't listen to them as albums. And I think that's really unfortunate because you're missing, you know, what the totality of what the artist is really trying to say in that moment in their creative, in that space. And people are just kind of like, oh, they're looking, oh, what's the most popular, which got the most hits, I'll just listen to that song, you know, or the single or whatever that the case may be, but they don't listen to the body of work, and it was crafted as a body of work, start, middle, end, a story, a flow. And I wish that people would kind of go back to actually taking the time and listening to an album in its entirety, you know. And then, you know, of course you're gonna have your favorites, but at least give it a proper listen, like give it the listen that it deserves, you know, because the artist put so much time and thought and, you know, emotion into that.
The song Something Missing has really tasty bass playing. Can you give a shout out to whoever's playing bass?
On that song, it would be Tom Mackay.
Okay.
Yes, yes,
Man,
it's
this
Tom
guy
Mackay.
is all over your career. I
Yeah,
mean, that's amazing. You guys are
yeah, he's
partners for sure.
completely. So he actually produced both those records with him, and he played bass on a lot of the songs and played some keys here and there, and played some guitar here and there. So he's got a big presence on both of my records. Yeah.
So the second album comes out 11 years later. So Lefty comes out in 2018. Are you playing drums on both the albums? Like I
Yep,
guess I just assume because you're a drummer. Yeah.
yep. But I don't have to, and I don't need like I. It's just it was easy because I know this. Obviously, I know the material inside out because I wrote it. But you know, there are times where I think, you know, I can think of a certain person that I know and go, you know what, he'd be better on this than me, or I'd love to hear what this guy would do or this girl would do on this as opposed to me. I know what I would do. I'm not interested in that sometimes. I'm interested in what that person would do. And maybe it'd be something that I would never think of that I go, wait a minute, that is awesome. So I'm always open to that.
So my favorite songs on the album are Second Guess, Looking for a Sign, and Right Where I Want to Be.
Nice.
Do you find that it's like the same three songs that everyone tells you they love, or is it all over the place and it's cool to hear that people like different songs?
It's usually, yeah, it's either it's two or three, but oftentimes, like, you know, like for me, Second Guess is one of my favorites, and there's only a few people that point that one out. Right Where I Want to Be gets a lot of mention, and so does Looking for a Sign gets a lot of mention. Those are probably the two that get the that are most consistently mentioned.
I'm glad I could put a spotlight on Second Guess then. So
Yeah,
our listeners, go listen to Second Guess. Both of your albums have 11 songs on them. Tony, is 11 songs the sweet spot for how many songs should be on an album?
I kind of like it because, you know, I've got a lot of songs. I've got hundreds of these things, man, and it's always difficult to kind of whittle away, you know, and then even in the process, as you're putting the album together, you go and write a new one that now you love and you go, oh, I gotta have this one on, but I don't want 13 songs on the album. 10's not gonna quite cut it because then I gotta, you know, but with 11, I can kind of, you know, I find a nice balance of my must-haves and what I think, you know, this new one that I just wrote, and you know, maybe some of the other ones might have to wait till another record. But 11 just seemed to be, it wasn't planned. It was just like it just happened to be like 11, and you know, it's not, you know, it's not too much to take in all at once. if people still want to do that, which I wish they would. And it says what I wanted to say.
Yeah, on a recent episode, I was talking about album lengths with someone, and I was saying that when there's more than 12 songs on an album, I always feel like there has to be a little bit of filler. Like if they shaved off 1 or 2 songs, it would probably be a better album. So I think 11, I think you know what you're doing with the 11 there.
Yeah.
I was asking if it was you playing drums on the albums, because I have a note for Lefty. For the album Lefty, I have a note saying the drums are awesome on this album. I feel like the drums stand out more on this album. Do you think your playing was a little more upfront on this album, or maybe it was just the songs you wrote that required more drumming?
I put more thought into it, and I sort of I you don't want to overthink drums, and as a drummer, you can fall into that sometimes, where you think too drummerly like, and you want to do something that's cool, but just because it's cool in drum world might not be cool in song world.
Might not be what's best for the song, I guess.
Exactly. So I think as I was maturing as an artist, and more coming into my own in those 11 years between, I could put some of those things aside and just go, this is what's best for the song, and let me do that, as opposed to what's going to make my drummer friends go, hey man, that's really cool. So
because you said that Second Guess doesn't get the same love as the other 2 songs, I'm going to put some extra love on it. So I have the following notes for Second Guess. I have beautiful piano playing, unique bass, great vocal delivery, one of my favorites. Just want to give it a little extra love, and then
awesome. Thank you. Appreciate that.
We'll move on. So Looking for a Sign, Right Where I Want to Be, and Armchair Lovers. These are slower songs. Tony, are you also a sucker for a good ballad? Tell me.
I am. I mean, I don't try to write ballads. I don't intend to. I just sometimes the lyrics come first, and then I don't know how it's going to end up sounding, and then I toy around with a few ideas. I dive into the emotional, impact that the song has on me, and then that kind of dictates whether it's going to be slow or fast or medium. And I think those ones that you mentioned, they kind of just lended themselves to be more sort of intimate and slower to get across what I'm trying to say. Because you gotta match the emotion, right? And you gotta not get in the way of that and overthink it. And if it's gonna be at 70 BPMs, then so be it.
So I did my research, and I was able to get some kind words from someone that played on your album Lefty. Okay. So here are some kind words from Casey Roberts, one of the most talented musicians I've ever met in my life. It's a long one, so bear with me. You got your tea with you there. Okay. This is what Casey has to say. He says, I was getting into the idea of trying out transcendental meditation. I normally can say that word. I don't know why I can't say it now. I was sort of having trouble pulling the trigger and going down to the center to sign up. I was on a gig with Tony, and I heard he did it. Tony has such a calm, positive, awesome vibe that puts people at ease. He told me he's been doing it regularly since the 90s, and the week he started meditating, he wrote his first song. He was the clinching factor in going, because I really liked Tony musically and as a person. I've stuck with it ever since, and it's a cornerstone of my life. Now, I've also had the pleasure of playing on one of his records, and we've been on many shows together. Tony is one of the people that make the Toronto music scene so great. A fantastic songwriter, creative, and a hell of a drummer and singer. Most importantly, he deeply understands the value of live music and the cultivation of the scene, as he proves every Sunday hosting the Free Fall open mic. So that's from Casey Roberts.
Awesome. Casey, thanks, brother. He's I don't know if you've seen his Casey Roberts and the Revolution. Amazing.
Many times in Toronto. He was my favorite live band. Anytime I had a date, I would bring them to that, because he would get everybody shaking their asses and dancing and having a great time. And I
Yeah.
knew he would never let me down as a
Oh
live
yeah.
performer. So
Amazing. And he's like a great guy, an amazing guitar player, amazing singer. He surrounds himself with amazing musicians for his band. And we've gotten to know each other through through my night, through working with Tom Mackay, and Steve York, my co-host at the open mic. He has a band called Mercy Flight, and me and KC were part of that. So I got to know him just personally, and he's a great guy. So when it came time to do my second record, I've got a bunch of guitar. I got Ricky Tilo, I've got Tom, I've got KC, but KC played on quite a few songs on there. One of the things I really loved about him is that he dives in really deep. Like I go, okay, here's a rough demo of the song. Obviously, you have to learn the arrangements and on all it, and then there's certain key things that have to be there. But then he takes it a step further, and he puts his personality in it, and then trusts that because I asked him for a reason. I asked him specifically. So there's something about him that I'm looking for, and I want Casey's personality, and he brings that. So he comes to the table knowing what you've given him, knowing what I want him to know, and then he's bringing Casey Roberts and his musical wealth and expression, and it's amazing. So there's stuff that's like, wow, I didn't even think about that, and he just puts it on there, and it sounds beautiful, amazing, and it takes the song completely to another level. Yeah, he's a monster talent.
So I mentioned earlier that when I was 18, I went to school for audio engineering, and my history with Casey, this is so random, but so I'm from Ottawa and he was in Toronto, and I went to school at 18 in London, Ontario. And I had a project where I had to go out and find a band and bring them in and record them. And that night I go out with friends. I go to a random bar in London, Ontario, and Casey Roberts was playing.
Awesome.
And he was singing, he was rapping, he was playing guitar. And I was like, this is the most talented human being on the planet. Yeah. So at 18, I randomly met him, brought him into the studio, recorded a song that ended up later on a future album. And we've stayed in touch since then. So it's completely random. And awesome. He's the man. And I guess the last thing I'm just like praising Casey here, but the last thing I would say is I had him on the podcast a few months ago.
Okay.
And man, so, some of the guests have sold 15 million albums, 10 million, 8 million. And Casey Roberts is still one of the top 10 most downloaded episodes of all time. Like that's how much his fan base shows up and loves him. He created this amazing thing with his career. So.
Yeah, and that's totally worthy of that, because he works hard. He works hard and he delivers the goods. And I've got nothing but mad respect for Casey Roberts.
So rumor on the street has it that there is a third Lalo album that is in the works. Can you give us any insight?
Yeah, I've written it. The songs are written. I want to start. I've got a full touring schedule ahead of me. I want to come back probably later in the summer. I want to get started on that. It's gonna be lots of guests and probably 11 songs, maybe 12. I don't know. Probably 11.
But you don't want to break the tradition.
I want to break the tradition. Yeah, but it's been I don't want to wait another 11 years. For this next one, I got a lot to say, and I love the recording process, man. I love just when you can see your vision start to really take shape and materialize, and sometimes in ways that you didn't anticipate. Hopefully, there's surprises, and it happens on both of the records, where you just you trust the people around you, and you let them in and let them express themselves in the way that they do, and then magic happens, and then you're sitting there with something that you didn't think in your wildest dreams that it would sound like that. And I love that process. That's one of my favorite things about the recording process, is that. So there's gonna be lots more of that, lots of surprises, and I'm gonna take my time with it, because I wanted to do it. I want to do it right. At the end of the day, you do a record, and you just have to be able to sit there and go, yeah, I love this, and whatever happens, happens. But I know deep down in my core that, you know, I express myself in the way that I wanted to, and it sounds the way I want it to sound, and I'm totally happy with it, and you know, be at peace with that. So that's what it's going to be.
If you do end up with a 12th song that is undeniable, that has to
Yeah.
go on the album, just make it a secret song deep
Secret
into the
song.
11th song so we don't
Yeah.
upset the gods. On
Don't
paper, it
upset.
still looks like
That's right.
11.
That's right. Yes. Yeah. You think you're onto something there.
Yeah. So I have one final question, and then we'll dive into Bedouin Soundclash. So this is a hypothetical. Okay. So
Okay.
bear with me here. Picture in the distant future. So let's say in 100 years, in 500 years, in 1,000 years, most of today's music has disappeared from public consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
Yet there's one Joydrop song and one Lalo song that survives in a capsule, the test of time, and is still being listened to. What song from each, the band and then you as a solo artist, which songs would you choose to properly represent you and your music? So it doesn't have to be the most popular, but what you would want to present to future generations of music listeners.
Ooh,
it's tough. I know
it is. For Joydrop, it would be one or two, or okay.
You can choose three, but I'm not happy about it.
Okay, it'll be beautiful. Definitely, Life on the Sun, and possibly Replaced.
Perfect. And then for your solo music,
for my solo, it would be. That's even tougher.
Only one or two. I'm not giving you three on the
solo. That's
you used your one time.
That's a tough one. Right Where I Want to Be, and an apology. I'll go with that one.
Perfect. Good choices. Yeah. It's funny. We're almost 2 hours into the interview, and we're just getting the Bedouin Soundclash now, which is like what's super exciting that's going on today for you. So we'll get through what we can here. Sure. You've been with the band since August of 2019. Yep. It's kind of like bittersweet where you join this band. It's super exciting, and then there's a global pandemic. I guess it's the equivalent of sometimes want to die right before 9/11. I don't know why this keeps happening to you.
I know the rock and roll gods are like
the acts of God or whatever keeps happening. But okay, so I guess the question is, were you on like such a high joining this band and excited, and then suddenly on such a low that it's like the opportunity was kind of taken away for a couple of years?
Yeah, I mean, when I joined the band, our first tour, we toured the UK, and that was I think around September of 2019. And right after that, we did about 6 weeks in the States with Mattis Yahoo right across the States. And
I loved him. Is it King for the Day? He had one massive hit that I was such a big fan back in the day.
Killed it, like live, it's just so good. And so we just did that, and then we took a little break, and then we did our Canadian headlining tour. Amazing. And then it was all set up. We had going back to the UK, going to the States again. We had all these tour dates, all this stuff lined up again. And then, like I told you, all the way to Kingston, all hell broke loose and everything shut down. So yeah, it was unfortunate. And then you don't know, like during COVID, I mean, so many things changed for people. There was lots of divorces and babies born and puppies and career changes. And, people, had time to sit there and reflect, make some changes in their lives, sometimes for the better, sometimes not for the better, but you don't know how people are going to emerge on the other end. And a band, even more so, because you're not just dealing with one individual. It's a collection of people that may decide we don't want to do this, or we want to go in a different direction, or we're not, anything could happen in terms of how things change. But I was glad to see that they were still going at it, and they still wanted to continue and still, continue touring and have me involved in that, which was great. So, we were doing, remember during the pandemic, there was certain times when things would open up for a little bit, and you know, you could go out, you could go see a show, but with all these restrictions. So we had little glimpses of being able to perform, and then get shut down again. And then last summer we started doing festivals, and then kind of carried us through some one-offs, and then we just did a little Canadian run last month.
You had 5 dates across Canada?
In Canada, yep. And then we're going to be doing 6 weeks in the States next month with the Interrupters. So
there's one Canadian date, isn't there? Maybe Vancouver, somewhere in there.
Yeah,
a little touch of Canada in there,
little touch of Canada, but that's going to be a good run. So yeah, just glad that they stuck to it and got back at it.
Do you feel that the 2 years of lockdown where there were no shows made you really appreciate the recent shows that you just did and the ones that are coming up?
Completely. And I hope everybody, even if you're not a musician, I hope everybody appreciates that, because listen, music it's everywhere in your life. You probably can't go a day without hearing it in some way, shape, or form. And I hope that people realized how precious it is and how important it is, and that they shouldn't be taking it for granted. And when I say that, support it. Like, you have to support artists. You have to, but I mean, I know the way the industry is set up now, the streaming thing, artists aren't getting paid. But if their live shows, go see them, listen to the albums. You know, don't just think that it falls from the sky and it just magically appears. No, these things cost a lot. They take a lot of time and effort. And if you don't support it, then it won't be there, not in a way that's meaningful. And I'm not talking, because they're getting to the point now where they got AI creating music and there is no artist behind it, right? And is that where we wanted to end up? No, but it's going to if artists don't step up and people don't get behind it and support it. So yeah, the pandemic definitely was a time to reflect and appreciate.
You're feeling gratitude that you're able to get out there again.
Yeah,
because there were periods where we thought we might never play live again.
Yeah,
right. There was uncertainty before the vaccines. People thought you'd just go outside and die. Like, we didn't know what it was. So it's nice that things seem to be mostly back to normal.
And I remember when people were doing like shows with people sitting in their cars. We don't want that. I got that people did what they had to do just to get themselves out there, but we don't want to go see a concert sitting in your car with a crowd full of people in their cars. No.
Yeah, honk twice if you like the song.
Exactly.
Man, the hardest is comedians were doing those kind of drive-through shows. So imagine with comedy where there's literally like the person can't laugh in front of you. There's nothing harder than stand-up. And then imagine that you're doing stand-up to just cars
and crickets. Yeah.
Oh man, not easy. So back on episode number 67 of the podcast, I had our mutual friend Sekou Lumumba, and his history of playing with Cardinal and Serena Ryder and everybody. He was playing with Bedouin Soundclash, and he's now with Big Wreck. And then later on, I find out that you're playing with Bedouin Soundclash. So I'm like, oh, that's awesome. 2 people I know have been playing with Bedouin Soundclash. So did he have anything to do with you playing with them? Is there a story?
He had everything to do with it. He'd moved on to some other gigs, and when they parted ways, he said, why don't you get Tony Rabalao? And Eon and Jay, the principal guys in the band, went, yeah, why didn't we think of that? Of course, because I've known them for a while, and I've known I've worked with Eon even before that with Yvonne Santilli's stuff. Jay I've met in our travels, and for them I was like, yeah, of course. So that was Sekou putting in a good word for me, and then making them realize that yes, that makes sense. So it wasn't even, I didn't even have to audition. It was just like,
oh, how nice is that? Where you don't have to audition. The songs.
We got a rehearsal on this date, and away we go. And it's been a blast ever since. Great guys, and got to know them really well over the years. And Just love playing with them and hanging around, and yeah, it's been a great experience.
Did you feel a lot of pressure joining a band that already had 5 albums and 19 singles and multiple gold and platinum certifications? Did you feel a ton of pressure joining that band, or was it more excitement at the opportunity of playing with such a successful band and knowing that you were the right man for the job on drums?
Yeah, I didn't feel pressure. I mean, I obviously I knew the band, and I know what they've done and their history. But I also know that, you know, I chose them and they chose me, and they chose me for a reason, and I chose them for a reason, and that's the thing that drives it. So if I just if I do what I do, if I be me, I think it should be good enough. Obviously, you know, you got to put the work in, you got to learn the material, you got to, you know, do all that stuff. But if I do that, which I did, then everything's going to be fine. And then there's a slight adjustment period because I'm not Sekou and I'm not Pat, their other drummer, or the other guys that have been in there before. I'm me. So they're going to adjust to me a little bit. I'm going to adjust to them. You do some shows, you have some conversations, you iron some things out, and you move forward. And it's been great. So I've enjoyed every step of the way.
What's the crowd reaction when you play When the Night Feels My Song? Because since that song came out in, I don't know, 2004, somewhere around there, I've been personally, as a singer-songwriter, I've been playing that song at open mics, and it's been in my set.
Yeah.
And people lose their minds. You know, maybe people don't know the verses, but by the pre-chorus and the chorus, people are singing and dancing and cheering. If it has that effect with some schmuck like me playing it, what is it like when the actual band is playing it live to a crowd that wants to see them?
It's pretty magical always. And you know, it's funny, some artists get a little bit precious when it comes to the things they're most popular for. And they feel like, oh, I don't want to play that anymore, you know. And it's like, why don't you just appreciate the fact that you've touched people to the point where they want to come pay money to come and see you, and you've moved them, and they want to experience that with you in the room. And to deny that just because you're being a bit precious, I think it's, you know, it's a bit silly. But they don't. They embrace it, and the room sings that song at the top of their lungs, and it's a magical experience, and it's awesome. You know, I mean, their fans are pretty, you know, they're pretty diehard, and they sing along to a lot of the stuff. But that one in particular, because that's the one that, you know, if a guy's, you know, a fan and he brought his girlfriend who's coming along to check it out, she'll sing along because she knows that song too, right? Whereas he'll be singing along to all the songs. But it's a great feeling when the whole room is singing along. So.
Would you say that that's your favorite Bedouin Soundclash song to play live, or is there another song when you look ahead at the set list, there's one song where you go, man, can't wait to get to that one?
Yeah. There's a song called Saltwater that was on the last album that we don't always play. We played it on the last tour, and our first Canadian headlining tour with me, we played it. We had a horn section, and there's this horn.
Oh, that's cool.
Horn riff that kind of goes throughout, and we played it with them, and it's a great song to play. It's just got a great vibe to it, and you know, it's Jay, the lead singer. He's from he's a West Coast boy, so the first line is "Salt water surrounded me all my life," because that's where he grew up, around salt water. So I just love the sentiment and the vibe of the song. Their stuff is a lot of the drumming is not what you would think. Like, as a drummer, it's like, oh, I wouldn't think to do that. Jay comes up with a lot of those drum parts, and I could tell that, because I was like, drummers don't think like that. That's coming from a different kind of mind. So it's sometimes challenging but fun to play the stuff that he put his drum ideas behind the songs, because it's like not conventional sometimes, and sometimes it is, but usually there's some element that you can kind of tell that this is just a creative mind that doesn't play drums came up with that.
In a lot of cases for Canadian bands, they might find success in Canada, but they don't find success in other countries. In Bedouin's case, they've had the success in Canada, but they've also had success in the UK, in Scotland, in Switzerland. You mentioned that Australia. You mentioned that before the pandemic, you're able to get out to the UK a bit and play. You've been doing Canada. You're about to do the US. are there any plans to get out to some of the other countries now that the world's opened up a bit?
Yeah, I hope so. I mean, we were going to go to Australia, but that didn't work out this summer. But hopefully, that'll happen, at some other point, and hopefully we'll get out to the UK again for sure. Because, like I said, like you said, they've got a strong fan base out there, and in Australia. So it'd be great to take the show out there and give the people what they want.
Yeah, you see, it seems like Australia just loves Canadian music. You see that with the success of City and Color that can go out there and Bedouin Soundclash. So the new album is We Will Meet in a Hurricane 2022. So it just came out last year. That's what you guys are currently promoting and touring behind. 2 singles, Shine On, as well as Something Lost and Something Found. What has the reception been like so far for the album from fans, from critics? I listened to it. Man, every Friday I see what new albums are out. I listen on average about 3 hours of music a day. I don't know how I still have my hearing, but I listened to it. I thought it was a great album. What are you hearing from your side?
Well, I mean, I don't know. I don't have a car, but every now and then I get these auto share, like an auto share car rent. What do you call it? Not a car rental thing, but you just book a car or whatever. So every now and then I'm driving around and I got it on Indy 88 or whatever, and I hear the song. I think not what was the single? It's We Fell in Love in no, not We Fell in Love. The one with the interrupters on it, and I hear it and I'm like, wow, sounds great on the radio. And then you do a show and you're kind of in a bubble because you're rehearsing and you're getting ready to do this thing, so you're not really you're not really aware of how it's resonating with people. And then you go to a show, and when you play new songs, sometimes audiences don't react, as well to the new stuff as they do to the stuff that they know. And but I've seen the reaction, people singing along, and they respond to it, which is great. Like I said, they have a pretty diehard fan base that listens to everything, and they embrace it quickly. So the album hasn't been around that long, but they already know all the words, so it's a good sign.
So I have a fan question sent in here. This is from Samantha Morris. Her question is, what would you say is the biggest difference between touring with Joydrop a few years back versus Bedouin Soundclash now? I guess from a band perspective and also from an industry perspective, if things have really changed.
Well, the whole industry has changed, which is interesting. So, people, when Joydrop was around, it was a radio video era. So people kind of got your music because they heard it on the radio, or they saw your video on Much Music or MTV, right? That's not the driver anymore. I mean, it's still there, but most people don't get their music from the radio. It's a streaming thing. So your audiences can be a little bit more diverse, because people kind of pick and choose. They cherry pick, and whereas in the past people tended to listen to a type of music, right, or certain types of artists. Now they're kind of a little bit more all over the map. And but the similarity being that live music isn't going anywhere. However you listen to it, that's one thing, but nothing will replace the live experience. Not a lot has changed in terms of that experience. It's gotten a lot more expensive, that's for sure, but people still have a hunger and a need to experience that in a room with the artist and a bunch of like-minded people musically, and that's not going anywhere. But I still love touring as much as I always have, and it's because of that basic element that has not changed. So yeah, they're very different musical experiences. Joydrop was my band, whereas in Bedouin, it's I am a part of something that I did not create, but I am definitely a part of it. So my stamp is not the same as it was back then, but I still get my joy from just the musical experience and the expression of that and the sharing of that with Bedouin as I did with Joydrop.
So I have some kind words sent in from a member of one of Canada's most iconic bands. This is from Jonathan Gallivan, a member of Moist. This is guitarist for Moist.
Yeah.
What's funny is he recently moved to the Ottawa area, and I was posting about I'm a goalie in hockey, and he was saying he hasn't played since he moved. And the last 3 weeks, he's come out and he's played in my hockey league. I brought him out. And can you believe it? I bring this guy out. I think it's a good idea. He scores the first goal of the game on me. I mean, I regretted my decision immediately. But anyways, he's back on the ice. And I've been connecting with him. So this is what Jonathan says. This goes back to the Joydrop days. He says, Tony is an incredibly friendly soul and is very calming and welcoming. Joydrop and my band at the time, My Brilliant Beast, were showcased at South by Southwest in 1998. I would have been 26 then, and this was my very first time playing a serious live concert ever. I remember Tony talking me through it and calming my nerves. It really helped me make that special event. It really helped make that a special event for me. So that's from Jonathan Gallivan.
Wow, that's awesome, man.
Reminiscing about the
past. That is great. It's when we in that era. And I remember it was like Moist, Big Wreck. I'm looking at some of the bands in your backdrop. There, Our Lady Peace, I Mother Earth,
Finger 11,
and we even to Econoline Crush to this day. I see these guys, and they're still doing it. We're still doing it, and we remember like you sit around and you remember stories. Sometimes you even forget. Little incidences that happen, but we're all still connected that way through our love of music and our travels. Canada's not that, it's a big country geographically, but it's not that big in terms of a market. So you cross paths quite quickly and quite easily when you're when you reach a certain level, and and then those connections that form out of those connections, it's an amazing thing. So
So last year, Moist released an album called End of the Ocean. And every year I have a podcast episode, the best albums of the year. And I had their album in my best albums of 2022. So if you haven't heard it yet, it is very good. It's up there with their best albums, like right here, Creature and Silver, their debut. So it's worth checking out. So I have just a few more questions and then we'll wrap up. You've had a lengthy career. You in the music industry. You mentioned it's I think the 20th or 25th year anniversary of one of the Joydrop albums. How do you keep this fun after all these years? You look like you're having a great time.
I am, because
what's the secret?
It's just a passion, and it's not even it's not a question. Listen, when you're passionate about something, it can bring you the most joy, and it can also bring you the most pain. And it's not always great. Sometimes it can be pretty brutal, but at the end of the day, you're doing what you love to do. It clothes me, it feeds me, it takes me all over the world, and I consider myself fortunate that I'm able to do that. And it's never stopped, and until I take my last breath, that's what I'm going to do. And you just keep your head up, keep working hard, keep searching, keep evolving and expanding, and it stays interesting and fun.
So I have one final quote. Can you handle kind words one more time, or am I laying it on too thick?
Man, I can take it. I can take it. My heart's big and it's getting full today.
All day. Amazing. So I put out the bat signal on your behalf, and all the great Canadian drummers showed up for you. So this is from Dan Todd, drummer for Platinum Blonde and Honeymoon Suite.
Okay.
So he keeps it short and sweet here. He says, I absolutely admire Tony's playing. He is brilliant. So that's from Dan Todd. Just nice. a little one you can store somewhere in here.
I'll take it. Thank you, Dan.
Amazing. All right, so we're down to just three final questions. These are the deeper, most meaningful, hardest questions.
Okay.
Are you ready for these ones?
Bring it on.
Bring it on. All right. When you look back on your life and career, what are you most proud of, and what are you most grateful for?
I'm most proud of that story that I told you about, that guy that was going to commit suicide. And the thing about that is that you can create something that means something to you, share it with the world, and actually have a positive effect on them, and maybe give them something to think about, or alter their trajectory in ways that you never imagined when you're sitting in your room writing it. And that's a powerful thing. And I think I'm most proud. I'm most proud of that.
Amazing. There you
Yeah.
go. So we do something here on the podcast where we have a past guest leave a question for a future guest without knowing who it is. So I have a question for you here.
Okay.
This is from another drummer. So this is from Suave Pure from the band Ill Scarlet. So a gold selling band here from Canada. His question is, what was your, oh, this is kind of what we just asked, but what was your most proud moment as a musician?
Yeah.
So I guess I could organize that better and just left his question in there.
There you go. But there you go. Again, that's like I said, and like I said before, early on, it's like you got to get into this thing for the right reasons. If you're trying to do it just to be popular or to get laid or get money, you're in it for the wrong reasons. You do it because you got something to say. You think it can have a positive effect on other people, and you want to share that. And when it happens, you go, yeah, thank you. That's why I got into this. So
what's funny is usually that question that people leave is ridiculous. Like, what's your favorite plant? Like, when's the last time you went to an art gallery? Just random stuff. So I guess I never assumed it would be a question that would duplicate, the question before it. So there you go. A little embarrassing on my part. Okay. Final question for you here. If you could go back and actually, we need you to leave a question for the next guest before I forget. So without knowing who it is, once you provide the question, then I'll tell you who it is. I got someone awesome coming up on Tuesday. Anything come to mind? Funny, silly, memorable, intense, any question come to mind right now I can ask?
Yeah, ask them. Listen, as a musician, whether you're a writer or an instrumentalist, you got to get your inspiration from somewhere. And where is it that you go for that? Because some people it's a different thing. Some people I can watch a movie and get inspired to create music. So I'm always curious, what non-musical place do you go to get inspiration so that it affects your creativity?
That's a great question. So on Tuesday, I have Bill Priddle from Trouble Charger. So that'll be a good question for him. And now it's the final question. I've been teasing this final question for the last 20 minutes. So final question is, if you could go back in time and you could sit down next to your 10-year-old self, and you could take a lifetime's worth of mentorship and training and experience and everything you've lived since then, and you could provide some words of advice for cute little Tony sitting there, innocent little 10-year-old Tony with a whole life ahead of him, what advice do you provide to him to help him navigate this life experience?
I would say, little Tony, you have a gift. Don't take that for granted. And don't think that just because you have that, it takes care of itself, because it doesn't. You got to nurture that gift, and you've got to feed that gift, and you've got to take some chances and put yourself out there, and don't be afraid to be afraid.
And where can people find you online? So whether they want to stay up to date with Bedouin Soundclash, whether they want to see what's going on with your solo music, maybe they're checking in for when that new album comes out. Maybe they want to play an open mic. Maybe they want to slide into the DM somewhere and say that they love the interview and they're looking for a drummer on their next album. Where do they go for, let's say, websites and social media?
Yeah, well, I have my lehlomusic.com website. That's Lehlo Music. That's LEHLO music.com. That's, if you want to learn about me, get a hold of me, you can find me through there. Freefallsundays.com is where we have our open mic at the Dakota. We're actually there tonight. Come by there, 6:30. Let's Don't mind something. Also I've got this fun cover band that call the Undercovers that I'm actually the drummer and the lead singer. So we just do all kinds of cool covers. That's theundercovers.ca. We play not that often because the guys in the band were all touring guys. So when our schedules allow, we have some fun at the not Dakota, the Wheat Sheaf or the Black Pearl or wherever. So we do that.
And then
Bedouin
Bedouin
social media.
Soundclash.
Yes, yeah, you can go to their website and also social media. I mean, the streaming platforms. I'm on all of those: Spotify, Apple Music. You can find my music there. You can find Joydrop there. Yeah.
That's perfect. And is there anything you'd like to say to the fans that have been with you since the very beginning? They followed you your entire career, regardless of which band, regardless of which instrument you're playing. Any words for these fans?
First of all, thank you. I appreciate the support and the love, and there's lots more to come. Stay tuned. And that means Joydrop, that means Lalo, and I'm involved in a lot of other things. So just stick with me. We got a long road ahead, and it's going to be an awesome ride. And thank you.
Amazing. So as we wrap up here, I just want to take a moment to acknowledge you for your lifelong pursuit of mastery as a drummer and as a singer-songwriter. I want to thank you for being so welcoming and supporting to local music. I'm speaking from experience, coming out to the open mics and really feeling that love and support and community. So you're helping, give back to the community and you're helping foster the next the next generation of musicians to come out of Toronto and Canada. It's very important. I want to thank you for creating great music with Joydrop, with your solo career. This is music that I listen to. So thank you for, enriching my life with your music. I want to thank you for keeping the Bedouin Soundclash train rolling. This is a great band. Yeah. And hey, if they don't find the right drummer, maybe they're not out there playing, who knows? So thank you for being a part of that train, keeping the train on time and coming out of the station. And I'm really excited to see what you do with the band in the future when it comes to the creation of the music, the recording of the music and all that stuff. And then last but not least, just personally, I want to say thank you for sitting down with me for the last 2+ hours, allowing me to, as a fan, pick your brain and ask the questions I've wanted to know the answers to for a very long time. So Tony, I appreciate you, and I really appreciate the interview and the time we've spent today.
Hey, Joel, it's been a blast. And I appreciate the fact that you are out there. One, you're a lover of music, clearly, and you're a musician yourself, but that you're giving a platform for all of us to share, our past, our journey, our future. And that's an important thing. You got to keep that train rolling, because we need all the support and the outlets that are out there for us to get the word out and let people get a little insight into what drives us. And that's a great thing you're doing, brother.
Thank you so much. You're very welcome. And look, to the fans of the podcast, to the listeners, to the Tony fans, to the Joydrop fans, to the Lalo fans, to the Bedouin Soundclash fans, thanks for sticking with us for the last 2 hours. We'll see you on the next episode.
Cheers. Next time. Bye.
If you've enjoyed today's episode of the podcast, please take a moment to subscribe, like, comment, and share. What I want to know is, who would you like me to sit down with next for a 2-hour deep dive interview? You can let me know by reaching out to me on social media. You can find me on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok at Joel Martin Mastery. Joel is Joel. And you can find me on Twitter and Snapchat at Joel Mastery. So I am done. I am complete. I approve this message, and I'll see you on the next episode.